Chapter 1484. How did you know that? Li Jinan asked. Old Captain Li looked as if he had expected it and said, they show it on TV every day. Something about a 3-minute painless abortion or an 8-minute hymen repair. Li Jinan coughed and said, don't watch so many useless commercials on TV. Not only are they misleading people but they're also misleading Grandpa. Old Captain Li said, in any case I don't believe that a married woman hasn't done anything. Do you think your grandfather has dementia? That's not it. Grandpa, I've already said that it's a marriage of convenience, Li Jinan said. Actually, that man has problems in that area. He's just marrying a wife for show. Old Captain Li looked surprised. Really? When Li Jinan saw that, he knew that Old Captain Li was at least half convinced. He looked at Old Captain Li seriously and nodded his head. Really? As for whether or not Shen Luo and really had problems in that area, that was none of his business. Old Captain Li immediately put on a sympathetic expression and said, that's pretty tragic. Most importantly, Grandpa, you taught me from a young age to be a responsible man. She gave her first time to me, so I have to be responsible for her, Li Jinan said with a serious expression. How do you know if it's true or not? Old Captain Li was in disbelief. How did you just happen to bump into it? Furthermore, you knew that she was divorced, yet you still went to mess with her. Aren't you being a hooligan? Li Jinan was slapped a few more times but he didn't dodge. In a muffled voice he said, I didn't know that she was married at that time. You can mess around just because you didn't know? Oh, you rascal. Ahem. I knew her at that time, so it wasn't considered messing around. Old Captain Li was speechless. He sighed and said, just don't be fooled. As long as you're happy. The children will have their own happiness. I'm not going to bother with you anymore. Thank you, Grandpa. Li Jinan held the old man's hand and smiled obediently. Old Captain Li harumphed and said, let's go. Accompany me for a walk by the lake. Sure. Don't be happy too early. I don't care, but do you think your mother will allow a married woman to marry into the family? Old Captain Li's tone was earnest as he said, and your father's side, your 2 older brothers. As he spoke, his temper flared up. He pinched Li Jinan's hand and continued, in the past I was afraid that your second brother wouldn't be able to rein in his infatuation, so I got him a wife. In the end, I managed to guard against your second brother. You're even more unconventional than your second brother, to actually get yourself a wife like this. What do you mean by that? It's not illegal to be divorced. Besides, the girl is nice and good looking. Most importantly, the relationship between them was very harmonious. It'll only count when you bring him back to take a look. As the old man walked, he said, Grandpa doesn't have much time left. Right now, my greatest wish is to give your child a name before I die. That way your entire generation will be named by me. As he spoke, Old Master Li grinned from ear to ear and said, I've already decided on the name of the child in Chanchan's womb. He'll be called Li Moyun. It can be a boy or a girl. What do you think? Moyun? That's right. That child, Mosin, still thinks that we're not his family. Let Chanchan's child have a Mo in his name so that he'll have a sense of belonging. Old Captain Li gazed into the distance. Under the blazing sun, the wind rustled the grass. We can't let old Tang go extinct. Chapter 1485. Yi Village was located in Yun Town, Ji Province in the south. It was about a 3-hour drive from Kingstown. Yi Yu rested at home for a day. The next morning she set off for the train station. After buying the ticket, Yi Yu slept the entire way. When she was young, her grandfather lived in a huge yard. There were chickens, ducks, dogs, and cats. Every time she entered, there would be a huge commotion. Moreover, there would be all kinds of poultry feces on the ground. It would stink the moment she entered. She hadn't been back for many years. Yuntown had changed a lot. Following her memory, Yi Yu found the old locust tree. This tree was hundreds of years old. Many people would pray there in the past. It was said to be an offering to the gods. Beyond the old locust tree was the second house in the third alley. Yi Yu carried a big bag and wore a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. She walked into the alley and saw a stainless steel security door. This place had been renovated and turned into a villa. The huge yard of the past was nowhere to be seen. There were no chickens, ducks, dogs, or cats. Yi Yu wondered if she had come to the wrong place. She stood at the door for a while. Just as she was hesitating about whether to call Yi Chanchan to ask, someone suddenly opened the door. It was a man with tan skin. He looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His hair was short and he looked clean and energetic. He was wearing a short-sleeved striped shirt. His face was neatly combed. When he saw Yi Yu, he was stunned. He seemed to be in a trance as he called out, "Chan Chan?" However, after taking a closer look, he realized that she didn't look like Yi Chan Chan. "Yu Yu?" Yi Zhenhua found it hard to believe. "Are you Yu Yu?" He spoke in the local dialect. Yi Yu hadn't heard it for many years. Even when he spoke to Yi Chan Chan, he spoke in Mandarin. Yi Yu was caught off guard. She suddenly recalled the times when her father carried her on his shoulders and ran around. He would always call her Yu Yu good girl, and Yu Yu beautiful girl. Yu Yu understood what he meant, but the man in front of her was a complete stranger. She wanted to reply in the dialect, but she couldn't. She didn't know how to speak it. Yi Zhenhua looked at her and asked in Mandarin, "Are you Yu Yu?" Yi Zhenhua was used to speaking in the local dialect. His Mandarin had a strong local accent. Yi Yu smiled and replied, "Yeah, I'm Yi Yu. I'm back." Hearing this, Yi Zhenhua also laughed. Her eyes curved as if she was touched. She looked around and asked, "Who did you come with?" "I'm alone." Yi Yu looked at him. Her eyes were watery. "I'm living with my sister now. I don't have much contact with my mother." Yi Zhenhua's eyes were slightly disappointed. Only then did he react and said, Come in and have a seat." Yi Yu nodded her head and walked in. She was greeted by a beautifully tidied courtyard. In the yard there were flowers and plants, looking very elegant and beautiful. When Yi Yu saw it, she was stunned. There were roses, Chinese roses, jasmine, all of them were flowers that Yi Tian liked. In the villa in the imperial capital, there were also these kinds of plants, but they were placed more elegantly and delicately. The flowers were in full bloom, and one could see that they had been carefully cared for. Yi Zhenhua saw her gaze, smiled and said, "I had nothing to do, so I planted some for fun." Chapter 1486. After all these years, he had never forgotten Yi Tian's hobby. Yi Yu walked in and looked around. She realized that the decorations were very elegant and exquisite. In this small town it was especially stylish. After looking around, she didn't see the old man anywhere. She had a bad feeling about this. She looked at Yi Zhenhua and asked, "Where's grandfather?" Yi Zhenhua saw the expression on his face and felt a little reproachful. It was as if she had done something wrong when she was young. He said, "Grandpa is inside. Grandpa doesn't know how to speak Mandarin. Do you know how to speak our hometown dialect?" Yi Yu thought for a moment and asked, "Grandpa?" Yi Zhenhua could not help but laugh. "Grandpa is inside, quickly go in." Yi Yu's heart warmed. She walked into the living room, but her grandfather was nowhere to be seen. In her memory, the old man who always supported her with a smile would slightly bend his back, pull her up and lead her everywhere. As soon as she walked into the old man's room, she couldn't help but feel her eyes sting. She almost burst into tears. The old man in the room had a head full of white hair and a haggard face. He wore a gray Chinese tunic suit and looked much older than before. When he saw Yi Yu, he called out, "Chan Chan is back." Yi Yu's eyes were burning. She walked over to the old man and said, "Grandpa?" Other than calling him Grandpa, she couldn't say anything else. It had been too long since she last came back. It had been so long that she had even forgotten about Fang Yan. It suddenly dawned on Yi Yu that she realized that living in the capital for so many years hadn't made her happy. The happiness she once thought was crumbling bit by bit. In the end, it was not as warm as the old man at home. The old woman reached out to hold Yi Yu's hand with her withered hand and remarked, "Chan Chan is getting prettier and prettier. Did you bring a boyfriend home?" Yi Yu shook her head and replied, "No." These two simple words were written in a dialect. Other than a few simple words, she couldn't think of anything else. She could only call out, "Dad." Hearing this, Yi Zhenhua walked in from outside and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm not Chan Chan. Please tell Grandpa that I can't speak anymore." Yi Zhenhua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly began to translate. The old man's eyesight was a little blurry and he was also slightly demented. When he heard Yi Zhenhua's words, he only gave a slight response. Then he said, "Eat." Yi Zhenhua said helplessly, "In the past 2 years his mental state hasn't been good. The doctor said that he has dementia and he needs to be watched at all times. So I haven't been working for the past few years and stayed at home to take care of him. Luckily, I had some savings when I was young so I could live comfortably without working. See, I renovated the house. Is it nice?" Yi Yu looked around. The decor was very elegant. It was very stylish in every way. However, this was also the style that Yi Tian liked. Light retro nostalgic style. He could see Yi Tian's shadow clearly no matter where he looked. Her hobbies and taste had seeped into this strange yet familiar home. She had abandoned a man who loved her so much and married a rich businessman who only knew how to be busy all day long. How sad it was for her to live such a luxurious life. Yu Yu pursed her lips and replied, "It's pretty." Chapter 1487. Most of the old man's teeth had fallen out. The food that Grandpa ate couldn't be too hard. Yi Zhenhua made some fragrant porridge and asked Yu Yu to feed him. After that, he went out. Yu Yu sat on a chair and fed Grandpa. She was careful. Grandpa ate obediently. His toothless mouth opened and closed as he looked at Yu Yu with a smile. Yu Yu's heart ached, but at the same time she felt a sense of warmth. When she was young, the old man would hold her hand and walk around with a bowl in his hand as he fed her. The love and pampering in his eyes seemed to be yesterday. Yu Yu scooped up a spoon and waited for the old man to eat, but he didn't move. As he looked at Yu Yu, his cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Yu Yu didn't move. She looked at him and said, "Grandpa, eat." The old man acted as if he hadn't heard her. His eyes stared straight at her. Suddenly he said, "Yu Yu is back." Those words made Yu Yu's eyes sting. She immediately teared up. She nodded her head and said, "Yes, Yu Yu is back." The old man opened his mouth and sucked on the spoon. He closed his mouth and began to chew on the porridge. His expression was no different from before. It was as if he hadn't said anything. Yu Yu's throat was choked. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yu Yu stayed there for the rest of the day. She brought along a change of clothes and took care of the old man for 2 days. Grandpa seemed to recognize Yu Yu. Every time he saw her, his eyes would curve into a smile. Yu Yu was very happy. The three of them sat at the same table and ate. Suddenly, the old man raised his head and asked, "Is Yu Yu married?" He spoke in a dialect and his voice was muffled. Yu Yu didn't react for a moment, but Yi Zhenhua understood. He suddenly remembered and asked, "Yu Yu, are you married?" She had stayed there for 2 days but none of them had brought it up. She hadn't expected Grandpa to know about it. Yu Yu was stunned for a moment and immediately replied, "I'm divorced." Yi Zhenhua was obviously shocked. Divorced? Why would they get divorced for no reason? Is there anything that a husband and wife can't discuss? What? Before she could finish her sentence, Yu Yu's cell phone rang. Yu Yu felt as if she had been pardoned. She immediately picked up her phone and said, "I'll take a call." The caller was Li Jinan. She picked up the phone and greeted him. "I'm at the door." Li Jinan's voice rang out, causing Yu Yu to choke on her words. "What?" Yu Yu couldn't believe it. Which in trance? "Yun Town, Big Locust Tree, 3rd Alley, 2nd door," Li Jinan said in a calm voice. He was simply narrating. The words that came out of his mouth struck Yu Yu like a bolt of lightning. She found it hard to believe. "What?" Yu Yu stood up and immediately headed out. He opened the security door and sure enough, he saw a tall and straight figure. He hung up the phone and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in for a chat?" Yi Qianqian asked. Yu Yu found it incredulous and asked, "How did you know about this place?" As soon as he asked the question, he immediately realized that it had to be Yi Qianqian. Li Jinan didn't reply. He walked around her and walked in. When he saw Yi Zhenhua walking out, he greeted politely, "Hello, Dad." Dash, 3rd Young Master 666. Chapter 1488. When Yi Yu heard that, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. "Dad." Li Jinan called him. "Dad." Yi Yu was stunned for a moment. She immediately went forward and pulled Li Jinan back. She exclaimed, "Are you crazy? Who are you calling Dad?" Li Jinan glanced at her and replied, "I'm calling you Dad. Isn't this your father?" "Yes, that's right." Li Jinan smiled and said, "As long as you didn't get it wrong." Yu Yu tugged at him and asked, "Is that the point? Why are you calling my dad Dad?" "I didn't call him Dad. I just called him Dad." "You heard wrong," Li Jinan explained with a straight face. Yu Yu was furious. She pulled him to the side and asked in a small voice, "Why are you here?" "I came to look for you," Li Jinan replied in amusement. "I also wanted to meet your parents." "Here." His hands were filled with health supplements. In addition to supplements, there were also various medications for Alzheimer's. One look at the packaging and you could tell that they were expensive. Yu Yu looked at the pile of things. Her face turned bitter. "Why are you? What's wrong?" Li Jinan pretended not to understand. Just as Yi Yu was about to speak, he looked at Yi Zhenhua and said, "I brought some things for you. You can take a look and see if there's anything you can use." Yi Zhenhua looked at the young man in front of him. His eyes shone with admiration as he said, "You're Yu Yu's? I'm your boyfriend for now." Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony as he introduced himself. But we can get married anytime. Yi Zhenhua nodded his head and said, all right. Come in and take a seat. Have you eaten? Not yet. Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony. He followed Yi Zhenhua in and said, I've been driving for more than 2 hours. I'm a little hungry. What an open-minded young man. Yi Zhenhua was so pleased that he couldn't stop smiling. He said, you hurry up and get your boyfriend a bowl and chopsticks. As he spoke, he took the things from Li Jinan's hands and said, it's fine as long as he's here. Why are you being so polite? Li Jinan smiled. It's what I should do. He looked at Yi Yuyu and said, thank you. She turned around and reluctantly went to the kitchen to wash her hands. She scooped some rice for Li Jinan. Yi Zhenhua picked up a pair of chopsticks and picked up some food for Li Jinan. He said, the food at home is a little more casual and there's not much to entertain. Just make do with what you have. Li Jinan glanced at it and remarked, that's a sumptuous feast. It looks delicious. She picked up her chopsticks and picked up a piece of crispy fried meat that Yi Zhenhua had just picked up. It looks, smells and tastes great. It's delicious. Yi Zhenhua smiled happily and said, it's good that you like it, it's good that you like it. Yu's cooking skills are better than mine. Fortunately, I'm not the one cooking today. Li Jinan was a little surprised and asked, you did this? Aren't you only good at the bottom? Yi Yuyu looked at him with disdain and asked, who said that? When she was with the Shen family, old Mrs. Shen made her do everything. Cooking and cleaning had to be done well. If any of them fell behind, wouldn't he be scolded half to death? Li Jinan nodded his head and said, in that case there's no need to hire a housekeeper in the future. You'll be better served than Lu Sa. Who's Lu Sa? Yi Zhenhua asked. She's my aunt. She's been with us for many years. Yi Zhenhua nodded his head. Young man, what's your name? Li Jinan, Yi Yuyu replied. Chapter 1489. Speaking of my father, you probably don't know him. My father's name is Li Shao and my grandfather is Li Sun. Hearing that, Yi Zhenhua's eyes immediately lit up. He clapped his hands and said, Commander Li Sun's grandson? When Li Jinan heard that, he nodded his head. Yes. Yi Zhenhua suddenly became excited and said, so you are Commander Li's grandson. You've grown so big in the blink of an eye. Yi Yuyu clicked her tongue and asked, Daddy, how did you know? When I was young, I stayed in Connecticut for a period of time. At that time, the city was not peaceful. If it weren't for the commander, I'm afraid I would have died. Yi Zhenhua was very emotional. This is fate. Xiaonan, how did you get to know our Yuyu? She works in my company, so of course we know each other. Li Jinan's words were very concise. Yi Zhenhua was taken aback and asked, didn't you join the army? Yes, but I got injured and retired. Yi Zhenhua felt a little regretful and said, where are you hurt? Is it serious? It's not serious. I just hurt the ligaments in my leg. I'll be fine as long as I don't exercise intensely for long periods of time. I've been resting for 4 to 5 years, so I'm fine now. When Yi Yuyu heard his words, she instinctively glanced at his legs. This was the first time she had heard him mention his injury. Before he had brought it up, she hadn't noticed it at all. Yi Zhenhua chatted with Li Jinan for a while. When she saw that Li Jinan was full, she chased them to the sofa. While cleaning up the dishes, she listened to their conversation. Yi Zhenhua's eyes and heart were filled with endless admiration for old Master Li Sun, from the gossip of his family to the various graces of old Master Li Sun. In fact, Li Jinan didn't know everything about his grandfather. When he heard him talk about it, it was the first time that he had such an image and understanding of his grandfather when he was young. After Yi Yuyu finished washing the dishes, she realized that they were still talking, so she took Grandpa out for a walk. By the time Yi Yuyu returned, the sky was already dark. Yi Zhenhua was sitting in the yard smoking. When he saw Yi Yuyu return, he stood up and took his father from her. He said, go and keep your boyfriend company. He looks a little tired, so I let him rest. Yi Yuyu was taken aback and asked, where did you send him to rest? Your room. The liquefied gas in the town is unstable. Go and see if you can turn on the hot water, Yi Zhenhua said as he helped his father to the room. The composure on Yi Yuyu's face cracked as she asked, Dad, how could you let a man into my room so casually? Yi Zhenhua was a little baffled. He turned around and said, haven't you been with him for a long time? What's there to be shy about? Besides, he's Commander Li Sun's grandson. He's reliable. Yi Yuyu was speechless. Just because he was Li Sun's grandson, he sold his own daughter. Yi Yuyu suddenly doubted her own position. Although she hadn't been back for so many years, it wasn't as if she couldn't even compare to Li Jinan. What the hell? Panting with rage, he walked to the room and opened the door. It was pitch black inside. She reached out to turn on the light. With a glance, she saw Li Jinan leaning against the side of the bed. His eyes were closed and his breathing was even. He looked like he was asleep. But the bed was still there and it didn't look like it had been touched at all. When Yi Yu saw it, her unhappiness dissipated a little. Chapter 1490. Li Jinan was shaken twice, but he had no intention of opening his eyes. Yi Yu lifted his hand and gestured. The corners of Li Jinan's lips curled up slightly. With a flick of his arm, he pulled her into his embrace. Yi Yu hadn't expected Li Jinan to make such a move. She was caught off guard and she was in his arms. Li Jinan held her as they lay down and said, "Lie down." Yi Yu's face burned. She reached out and pushed him away. "Didn't I ask you to lie down with me in your arms?" With that, she struggled even harder to push him away. Li Jinan's strength wasn't something she could shake. She couldn't move him at all. His head rested on her shoulder as he slowly opened his eyes. His dark pupils were shockingly bright in the dim light. In a husky voice, he whispered, "Then should I lie on top of you?" Yi Qianshan looked at him and asked, "I'll lie on top of you?" Yi Yu's heart raced. She didn't know whether it was because she had received a shock or something. Li Jinan leaned his head in and shifted his body slightly. Straightening himself, he said, "It's pretty comfortable." You. Yi Yu was about to say something, but before she could say anything, she felt a wave of darkness looming over her. Li Jinan's lips were captured. His actions were gentle and slow as he sucked lightly. Yi Yu's heart raced. Li Jinan's hand gently caressed her waist. His rough palm caressed her. Yi Yu's body trembled slightly, and her breathing quickened. She reached out and pushed his shoulder away. Turning her head away, she whispered, "This is my father's house." "I know." Li Jinan panted slightly as he leaned over to look at her. "So, not here?" Yi Yu whispered, a little embarrassed. "There are elders at home." Li Jinan smiled and kissed her on the lips. "Did you think I came looking for you just to sleep with you?" Although that was part of the reason, it wasn't the entire reason. Yi Yu suddenly felt embarrassed. She struggled and said, "If that's not the case, then let go." Li Jinan's smile deepened as he asked, "Do you want to sleep with me?" "No. Let go. It's fine even if you want to. I don't mind." Yi Yu's embarrassment turned to anger. She struggled for a moment and asked, "Are you going to let me go or not?" "Okay. Let go." He let go and she immediately got up. Li Jinan turned around and lay on the bed. Looking at her flushed face, he was in a good mood and said, "Come on. I'm ready." Yi Yu laughed. She picked up the pillow beside her and threw it at Li Jinan's head. "I'll sleep with you, my foot." Li Jinan's head was under the pillow. His laughter was muffled but it was hearty. He said, "I'm fine with sleeping on my head. I don't mind." Yi Yu was speechless. "I can't continue this conversation." She turned around, found her pajamas, walked into the bathroom and stomped angrily to take a shower. Because of Li Xiqing's revenge, Li Jinan had a lot of documents to deal with. He had been busy all night and was really tired today. However, he hadn't brought any clothes with him. He stood up and took off his coat. He sat on the edge of the bed and waited for Yi Yu to come out. Yi Yu was wearing a white negligee. When she came out, Li Jinan's eyes widened. When she saw his gaze, Yi Yu felt a little awkward. "I only have one set of pajamas. I didn't plan to stay long." Chapter 1491. Li Jinan was bare-chested, revealing his well-defined muscles. His tan skin made him look very healthy. When Yi Yu saw him walking over, alarm bells went off in her head. She took a step back and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Jinan walked over and stopped in front of her. His lips curled up slightly as he lowered his head to look at her. Yi Yu felt a little uncomfortable. Her body tensed up as she leaned back. Her heart was pounding as she looked at him. Li Jinan looked at her expression and said softly, "I'm going to take a shower." With that, he walked around her and headed into the bathroom. Yi Yu suddenly felt a little silly. Her face began to burn. Annoyed, she turned to glare at Li Jinan and stomped her foot. Why did he have to get so close to me for no reason? He made me think so much, sob. This is too awkward. With that glare, Li Jinan happened to turn his head. Li Jinan could see the expression on her face. Li Jinan chuckled and said, "Help me wash my clothes." With that, he turned around and closed the bathroom door. Yi Yu was even more annoyed. She angrily went back to the bed. When she saw the clothes that Li Jinan had left on the chair, she picked them up and sniffed them. It smelled good. Despite the scorching summer sun, There wasn't much of a smell. I don't need to wash them at all. They aren't dirty. In any case, I'm leaving tomorrow. Yu tossed the shirt back and ignored him. When Li Jinan walked out, Yu was sitting on the bed playing with her phone. Her clothes were still there. He strode forward, took off his shoes and got onto the bed naturally. Yu only glanced at him and didn't mind. She lowered her head and continued. In any case, she had already done what she should and shouldn't have done several times. Li Jinan felt a little defeated. He leaned over and asked, "What are you looking at?" Yu ignored him. She looked down at her Weibo and laughed. Li Jinan leaned over her arm and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Yu was a little startled by his intimate action. She took a step back. Li Jinan didn't seem to realize that his action was inappropriate. He leaned over and said, "Let me look too." He was bare-chested, revealing the distinct lines on his body. The muscles on his arms, abdomen and back were all very robust. In this way his weight would naturally not be low. Yu felt a weight on her leg. His entire body was on top of it. He craned his neck to look at her cell phone. With one glance he saw the page on her phone. The title was striking. How does it feel to have a boyfriend with a good figure? Li Jinan's first reaction was to look at himself. Seemed not bad. Yu immediately raised the phone and said, "It's so heavy. Get lost." He pulled her hand down and said, "Your boyfriend has a great figure. Aren't you talking about me? Let me see." Yu immediately shifted the phone away. She raised her hand and said, "You're invading my privacy." Oh. Li Jinan retracted his hand. He looked at her meaningfully and said, "So, you do such things in secret?" Her first reaction was to ask, "What did I do?" "You're plotting against me." Li Jinan seemed a little emotional and angry. He lay on her lap and said, "I never expected you to be such a person." Chapter 1492. Did I? Li Jinan smiled and reached out to take her phone. "Let me see. Let me see. Get up. Give it to me and I'll get up." Yu was exasperated and handed the phone over. Li Jinan stood up and took it. There were a few pictures on it. He read them aloud. 1. Don't want him to wear clothes. Want to strip him naked at any time. So, you're that kind of person. Yu was embarrassed by his reading. She reached out to snatch the phone back. "Give it back to me." Li Jinan dodged, and Yuyu's hand touched his chest. Yu realized it and immediately retracted her hand as if she had been electrocuted. However, he reached out and held her hand in place. Li Jinan held her hand and continued reading. 2. Get wet at the sight of him. Want to f*ck him? Yuyu's face turned even redder. She said, "It was just a random swipe. It wasn't me." Tiske. Li Jinan held the phone in his hand and looked at her in disgust. So women are like that too, thirsty? He had thought that women were shy and bashful. The women on Weibo were too open. Yu felt too ashamed to show her face. Her hand was placed on his left chest. His heartbeat could be clearly heard on her palm. It was steady and rhythmic. Even when he spoke, his chest vibrated slightly. She could clearly feel it. Yu was embarrassed. "Why did you read it out?" "I'm used to reading things out loud." Li Jinan looked at her with a mischievous look in his eyes and said, "It'll feel better that way." Yu saw the dangerous look in his eyes and felt even more embarrassed. She instinctively drew her legs back and raised her hand to snatch it back, but he held her wrist in his grip. With a gentle tug, she fell into his arms. Li Jinan had a pair of beautiful eyes. They were long and narrow. His dark and deep eyes stared straight at her. When he lowered his head, she could smell that he had just showered. It was clean and fragrant. The feel of his skin on her skin was very clear. Yuyu's heart raced. Li Jinan put the phone aside. He lifted her chin with one hand and pressed his lips against hers. His soft lips parted gently. Li Jinan pried them open and pulled her into his arms. He took the opportunity to pin her under his body. Yuyu's heart raced. She blinked a few times and her breathing quickened. Li Jinan closed his eyes and tasted her lips delicately. He caressed her waist and slid his hand up to gently lift her spaghetti strap, revealing the straps of her bra. Yuyu's breathing grew heavy. She reached out and smacked his hand away. Turning her head away, she said, "No." Li Jinan opened his eyes and stared at her. Yu twisted her legs and whispered, "It's not good to stay at an elder's place. Tomorrow we'll go back to Kingstown? Do it again?" Li Jinan raised his eyebrows and smiled. His straightforward words caused Yu to turn her head away. She blushed and responded with a grunt. Li Jinan released her and lay down beside her. He asked, I heard that women don't like to wear this when they sleep. Do you wear it even when you sleep? Yu Yu was stunned. Huh. It was only then that she realized he was referring to her bra. Aren't you here? If you're not here, I won't wear it. What's there to be afraid of? It's not like I haven't seen it before. I'm afraid that you're plotting something against me. Chapter 1493. Yu Yu was at a loss for words. She pushed him away and said, "Go away." He flipped over and hugged her. "Why should I go away? You're up to no good. You're only finding out now?" Li Jinan spread his legs and pinned her between them. "It's too late." Yu Yu pushed his legs away in annoyance and asked, "Am I inviting a wolf into my house?" "No." Li Jinan narrowed his eyes as he hugged her. "If I were a wolf, you would have been eaten by now." Yu Yu snorted. "I would have eaten a long time ago." "Oh, yes I did." Li Jinan's lips curled up in a smile as he hugged her. "So, you have to be careful. The wolf won't leave until it's full." Yu Yu blushed. She elbowed him and said, "Get lost." Li Jinan chuckled but didn't move an inch. They hadn't had a good rest for a few days. Li Jinan soon fell into a deep sleep with her in his arms. Yu Yu's chest was filled with anxiety. When she heard the even breathing coming from beside her, her cheeks began to burn. This feeling. Why do we feel like we're husband and wife? Is this how it feels to be a married couple? Living under the same roof, lying on the same bed, leaning against each other, whispering to each other, teasing each other. Yu Yu turned her head and glanced at Li Jinan. Li Jinan's features were very good-looking. With his eyes closed, he looked less sharp than usual. He looked very quiet and gentle. Yu Yu gently lifted his hand and turned around to face him. This is Li Jinan. A man who was completely different from Shin Luo An. A man who gave her the feeling of a married couple and the reality of a married couple. For some reason Yu Yu was in a good mood. She reached out and pressed the button on the bedside table. The room was dark. Yu Yu closed her eyes. Unbeknownst to her, in the darkness, Li Jinan's lips were silently curled up. Li Jinan slept soundly until early in the morning. When he opened his eyes, Yu Yu was in his arms, breathing evenly as she faced him. The white spaghetti strap dress didn't obstruct his vision much. With one look he could see her full, snow-white cleavage. It wasn't big, but for Li Jinan, it was extremely tempting. His body felt hot and Li Jinan felt his mouth go dry. With a slight movement, Li Jinan retracted his leg and breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Yu's body moved a little and she opened her eyes. She noticed that his face was abnormally red, but thought that it was because he had just woken up and felt a little warm, so she didn't take it to heart. She stretched out her hands and kicked off with her legs. She yawned and moaned in pleasure. However, she noticed that Li Jinan had turned his head to look at her. His eyes were burning. Li Jinan saw that under her snow-white arms, her delicate skin was slightly flushed. It was a seductive color. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. It wasn't a hot body, but it made him more and more unbearable. When Yu Yu saw his gaze, she felt a sense of foreboding. She instinctively took a step back. Li Jinan felt his body stiffen. He looked at her and asked in all seriousness, "Why did you seduce me?" Yu Yu was a little confused. She looked at him in bewilderment. "What do you mean?" Chapter 1494. Yu Yu looked at Li Jinan's back from behind. She was a little confused. After thinking about it, she still didn't know what she had done. Ridiculous. Yu Yu stood up and yawned. While Li Jinan was gone, she took out her clothes. She glanced at the bathroom and heard the sound of running water coming from inside. He probably won't be coming out anytime soon, right? As Yu Yu thought about it, she lifted her nightgown and took it off. Just as the nightgown left her head, the door to the bathroom opened. Li Jinan's face was wet. When he saw Yu Yu's exquisite figure, the fire that he had just quelled was ignited again. His throat tightened and his mouth went dry. When Yu Yu heard the door open behind her, her body stiffened. She turned her head and saw Li Jinan walking toward her. Li Jinan raised his long arm and pulled her over. Yu Yu gasped and clutched her chest. She looked at him warily and asked, What are you trying to do?" Li Jinan didn't respond. He pressed his strong and tall body against hers. His breathing was a little rushed as he pushed her against the closet. Yu Yu instinctively held her breath as she looked at him. Her heart was racing. Li Jinan took a deep breath and resisted the urge to pull her along. He asked, "Don't you know that there's a man in the room? Didn't you go to the bathroom? Who knew that you would suddenly come out?" Yu Yu was exasperated. "Even if I saw him, so what? It's not like I haven't seen him before. Why are you reacting so strongly?" Yi Yuyu's words were self-righteous. When Li Jinan heard that, he leaned forward and pressed her against him. In a low voice he said, "Don't you know that it's easy for men to get into trouble in the morning? I didn't do it on purpose." Yi Yuyu pushed him away and said, "This is my home. Why should I care about you? Ridiculous." Ugh. Before she could finish her sentence, it was stuffed into her mouth. Li Jinan's actions were merciless. He pressed her against the closet roughly and pried open her lips to suck lightly. Yi Yuyu's eyes widened. The first thing she realized was that she hadn't brushed her teeth. No, she hadn't brushed her teeth. He quickly shrank back, but the space around him was already pathetically small. There was simply no way to dodge. She wanted to push him away, but she couldn't move him at all. Li Jinan's hands were getting more and more erratic. Yeah. Yi Yuyu reached out to push his face away and said, "I said no." Li Jinan pressed his body even tighter against hers. His hot lips pressed against her abdomen as he asked, "Can I hurry up?" "I can't." Yi Yuyu's face turned even redder. In a small voice she said, "I'm not feeling well. Let's wait until we get back to Kingstown." Moreover, was he really that fast? She didn't believe it. Li Jinan chuckled and planted a big kiss on her lips. "Okay," he replied. Yi Yuyu's face turned even redder. She quickly picked up the straps and said, "Go away. I need to get dressed." "All right. You splashed water all over my face. I can kiss you clean." "No need." She picked up the clothes that she had hung out to dry the day before and put them on. "Hurry up and get out. Don't let my dad think that we're doing something in here." Li Jinan harumphed lightly. "I'd like to." Yi Yuyu turned her head and glared at him. She raised her leg and kicked him. "Get out." Chapter 1495. Yi Yuyu turned around and glared at him. She extended her leg and kicked him. "Get out." Li Jinan was burning with anger. He wanted to see her, but he was afraid that he wouldn't have enough self-control and would be kicked down. He walked out, picked up his shirt and put it on. However, it was not appropriate for him to leave immediately. He stood at the corner of the wall and calmed his emotions before slowly walking out. Outside, Yi Zhenhua had already prepared breakfast. When he saw Li Jinan walk out, he smiled and waved at him. "Why are you up so early? Come and have your breakfast. I'll help Grandpa Yu out." "Let me help you." Yi Zhenhua was very pleased with Li Jinan's thoughtfulness. He nodded his head and waved his hand. "It's fine. You go ahead and eat first. You should be out in a while. You want to return to Kingstown today, right?" "When?" "Yes, you'll have to ask Yu about the exact time. I'm fine with anything. There are only 2 buses going to Kingstown. One at 10 in the morning and one at 2 in the afternoon. There won't be any later. You'd better take the afternoon one. There's more time." Li Jinan's heart warmed slightly as he replied, "Thank you, Dad. I drove my own car here. I can leave at any time. Even tonight is fine. I'll let Yu accompany you for a little longer." Yi Zhenhua understood and said, "There's no need. It's dangerous to go back at night. We have to leave before it gets dark." As they spoke, the 2 of them arrived at Yuyu's grandfather's room. Yuyu's grandfather had long since woken up. He was sitting on the edge of the bed holding a photo frame. His turbid old eyes were filled with warmth as he looked at the photo. Sensing the commotion above him, Yuyu's grandfather raised his head. When he saw Yi Zhenhua, he smiled kindly and beckoned him over. "Come here." Yi Zhenhua felt a little helpless. He walked up and said, "Dad, let's eat." Yuyu's grandfather smiled and said, "Why isn't your mother back yet?" When Li Jinan heard that, he was slightly taken aback. Yuyu's grandmother wasn't home, and Yi Qianqian had never mentioned her. She had probably left long ago. But the old man was already suffering from Alzheimer's, yet he still remembered his departed wife. Yi Zhenhua reached out to help him up and said, "Mom will come back. Recently there has been a good harvest in the fields, so Mom is quite busy. I'll go help your mom." "Mom, I don't need your help. You just have to wait at home." "Oh." Yuyu's grandfather was still holding on to the photo frame. He said, "When can she come back?" "I'll be back when I'm done. Leave some food for her. She can eat it when she comes back." Yuyu's grandfather held the photo frame tightly and looked at his wife in the frame. "Don't say that I don't miss her again. It wouldn't be good if she loses her temper and runs away from home." Yi Zhenhua nodded in response. He was already used to this. He reached out to take the photo frame in his father's hand and said, "Dad, it's time to eat. Put it down." "Oh." The old man was a little reluctant. He looked at the photo frame and was led out by Yi Zhenhua. But after 2 steps he turned back and said, No, your mother will throw a tantrum later and say that I don't care about her anymore. This woman is very troublesome. As he said that, he hugged the photo frame in his arms and walked out with satisfaction. What's to eat? Li Jinan's heart, which had not been touched for many years, was unexpectedly touched by this old man. He felt a little bitter. Chapter 1496. He supported Yi Yuyu's grandfather to the dining room. Yi Yuyu was already sitting there. Her clothes were neat and tidy and she had no makeup on. She looked good. After serving breakfast, she took a bowl and blew on it before walking over to the grandfather. When the grandfather saw Yi Yuyu, a smile broke out on his face. Yuyu. Yi Yuyu responded with a grin. Her smile deepened. After breakfast, Yi Yuyu took the grandfather for a walk before she was chased away by Yi Zhenhua. Li Jinan's car was parked in a parking lot in Yin Town. It was some distance away from Yi Yuyu's house. Yi Yuyu was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. She had on a pair of casual sneakers. Her skin was much fairer than most people in Yin Town. Coupled with Li Jinan's physique and appearance, many people were looking at them along the way. Hey, isn't that Qian? No way. Qian isn't that tall, but they really look alike. Who's that man? He's so handsome. That's Yi Qian. I saw her walk out of Uncle Genoa's house with my own eyes. It can't be wrong. Many people were looking at them and discussing them. Although Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu knew about it, they didn't care. After getting into the car, the crowd exclaimed when they saw it coming out. It's a Bentley. *CK. He's so rich. Yi Qian has hooked up with a rich man. Achoo. Yi Qian was sitting comfortably in her office when she suddenly felt a gust of cold wind. She shivered and said, "It's so cold. Turn down the air conditioner." "Hey sis, it's already 26 degrees. A colleague beside her said. "Did you catch a cold last night?" "Of course not." Yi Qian stood up just as the bell rang. She was relieved. "I'm going to get lost. I'm freezing." Before she could leave, she heard her phone ring. She picked it up. It was a phone call she hadn't received in a long time. When she saw the caller, Yi Qian was a little surprised. She picked it up and said, "Hello? Hello, long time no see. Where are you?" "At the office. I was just about to go eat." Achoo. Yi Qian's nose itched and she sneezed. Shinjilia whistled and said, "I think you need some medicine. Let's go. Since you've caught a cold, you should eat something hot. Shall we go for hot pot?" "I'm not going. Are you crazy to eat hot pot on such a hot day?" "What do you want to eat then?" Shinjilia drove to the headquarters of Eurasian Comics with ease. "Whatever you say. I want to eat expensive food. Treat me to fried paste noodles." Shinjilia asked, "Can't you be more ambitious?" "Shredded pork with bean sauce then. I'm not picky." Shinjilia was speechless. He turned the car around and saw Yi Qian walking out of the Eurasian Comics. He pressed the horn. Yi Qian looked over and walked toward him. He got into the car and asked, "Where did you get a car? What are you doing in Kingstown?" I've been transferred to the hospital in Kingstown." "This is the car assigned by the hospital. You can come and play with me anytime in the future." Yi Yuyu fastened her seatbelt and said, "I'll register with the specialist if I don't go. Don't embarrass yourself." Shinjilia chuckled. "Fine, I won't hang up. Anyway, with the way you are, it's good enough that you don't cause mental illness in others. I don't expect to earn your money either. What are you going to eat?" Chapter 1497. When he heard Yi Yuyu's name, Shinjilia raised his eyebrows and asked, "Where has she been recently?" "I went back to my hometown to visit my father and grandfather." Yi Qian picked up her phone and realized that Li Jinan had gone to look for Yi Yuyu. There had been no news until now. Did they find him or not? Yi Qian glanced at Shinjilia and asked, "How's your brother doing recently? Why are you suddenly asking about him?" Shinjilia drove steadily and quickly changed the topic. "I know a hot pot restaurant with a nice environment." Yi Qian replied, "Oh?" She sent Yi Yuyu a WeChat message and asked, "Are you with Li Jinan?" Yi Yuyu, "Yeah." "Yi Yuyu, why did you bring him here? I'm so embarrassed." "Sisai, haha, did you make any sparks?" Yi Yuyu, "No." "Sisai, where are you now?" Yi Yuyu, "Kingstown, do you want to have dinner together?" Zixixi, Shinjilia suddenly came to see me /ho/ho/ he wants to take me to eat hot pot. I wanted to ask you to join us, but won't it be awkward for you to eat with your current and ex-brother? Yi Yuyu, there was a traffic jam in Kingstown that day. Li Jinnan took the opportunity to sneak a peek and immediately spotted his current or ex-younger brother. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Your sister?" "Yeah, she asked us to have dinner together. Shinjilia was there too." "Where are they?" "I don't know," Yi Yuyu quickly replied to Yi Chanqian. "Let's go eat by ourselves." "It's fine. Let's go together. It's just Shinjilia, not Shinluo-hun." His eyes darkened and he slowly said, "It just so happens that I have something to ask him." "Oh." Yi Yuyu was determined. "They're going to eat hot pot. I want to eat barbecue. Let's go." Li Jinnan didn't insist and asked, "Which family?" Yi Yuyu casually said a name. For some reason she felt a little frustrated. Her chest felt a little tight. The mention of Shinjilia's name reminded her of Shinluo-un. During this period of time, Shinluo-an's name seemed to have faded from her heart. But when it was brought up again she still felt uncomfortable. Like a wound that was about to form a scab, it was suddenly torn open and exposed to the air. The scarlet red was so ferocious that it was impossible to ignore it. Li Jinnan could tell that something was wrong with her and his heart sank. "I heard that he's getting married to his childhood sweetheart. Is the wedding this month or next?" Yi Yuyu was taken aback. She glanced sideways at him. His side profile was chiseled and strong. Li Jinnan glanced at her and said, "I've received another piece of news. Do you want to know about it?" When Yi Yuyu heard that, her first reaction was to say, "No." Li Jinnan acted as if he hadn't heard her and continued, "While he was still married to you, he had a relationship with his sister that went beyond familial relations." "Enough." Yi Yuyu didn't want to hear it. "I know all that. My relationship with Shinluo-an is over. There's no need for me to know anything about him." Chapter 1498. His tone was a little harsh, which made Yi Yuyu feel uncomfortable. She looked at him and said in a harsh tone, "Do you think you're so noble? Don't forget, the thing you're talking about used to be my husband." It was also the memories of her youth, the obsession of those years. That kind of thing, so what? He wasn't like this in the past. Li Jinnan's expression darkened when he heard that. Yi Yuyu? Yi Yuyu decided to ignore him. If he continued talking, she was afraid that they would quarrel. She didn't want to argue with him. She closed her eyes and remained silent. Li Jinnan's lips were pursed tightly. The car drove in an orderly manner, but his heart was not calm at all. When they arrived at the restaurant that Yi Yuyu had mentioned, Li Jinnan parked his car and walked in with Yi Yuyu. Along the way, the two of them did not say a word. The moment she entered, Yi Yuyu picked up the menu and ordered a set meal for two. She didn't even bother to ask Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan felt a little stuffy. He poured her a glass of water and then a glass for himself. Yi Yuyu glanced at him and picked up her phone. Yi Chanqian and Shinjilia had already started eating hot pot. Shinjilia even took a video of her. Yi Yuyu glanced at it. She raised her eyes and stole a glance at Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan looked at a green potted plant on the side. It was a small fake tree and it looked quite cute. However, Li Jinnan didn't seem like the kind of person who would look at such a thing. Yi Yuyu pursed her lips and thought back to what she had said in the car. "Did I go overboard?" As if sensing Yi Yuyu's gaze, Li Jinnan quickly looked over. She immediately turned her head away and looked at the teacup in front of her. She felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. After some thought, she replied, "Li Jinnan." Li Jinnan calmly replied, "Yeah. I don't miss him anymore." Yi Yuyu took a sip of water. She didn't dare look at him as she said, "I haven't thought about him for the past few days. In the past, I would think about him and worry about him. Ever since the divorce, those feelings have faded a lot." Li Jinnan looked up at her with his dark eyes and didn't speak. Yi Yuyu felt his gaze on her and felt a little uncomfortable as she replied, "I think about you more than I think about him." Li Jinnan's eyes, which were originally deep and dark, relaxed a little in an instant. His face looked much better. But? Li Jinnan looked at her and raised his eyebrows. "After all, he's someone I've loved for so many years. It's impossible for so many years of feelings to disappear just like that. I grew up with him. To me, he's not just my first love." Yi Yuyu raised her head and saw that Li Jinnan's expression was much warmer than before. She breathed a sigh of relief and said, "He's like an older brother to me. I respect him very much. He wasn't like this in the past, but in recent years, yeah." Li Jinnan crossed his arms and looked in another direction. The waiter came to serve the dishes and help them deal with the barbecue. The two of them were silent again. Both of them didn't speak until they finished eating. After leaving the restaurant, Li Jinnan retrieved his car. The two of them sat in the car together. The atmosphere was eerily quiet. Yu couldn't take it anymore and asked, "How much longer are you going to be unhappy for?" Chapter 1499. His tone was calm and emotionless. However, Yu could hear the coldness in his voice. It was a far cry from his usual demeanor. Yes. Yu was very certain. Li Jinan didn't even look at her. He continued driving and said, "I'll send you back." "This, send me back?" Yu pursed her lips. She felt a surge of anger in her chest. "He's sending me back? Sending me back? He's actually saying that he's sending me back?" Her heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. It was indescribably painful. Yu turned around. She didn't want to bother with him anymore. "I'll go back then. I can't afford it? Damn it. That man. He's so petty." Yu felt aggrieved. She turned her head to look out the window. Her lips turned down. Very quickly they arrived at Yuyu's neighborhood. Li Jinan stopped the car by the roadside. Yu immediately unbuckled her seatbelt. Just as she was about to open the car door, Li Jinan suddenly said, 15 minutes. Pack your things and come down quickly." His inexplicable words shocked Yu. "What?" "I'll wait for you here. From now on you'll live with me." Li Jinan looked at her with an indescribable brightness in his eyes. She could clearly see her own reflection in his eyes. Yu couldn't stop her heart from racing. "Why do I have to live with you? This is so ridiculous." "You don't want to?" Li Jinan looked at her and raised his eyebrows. "No. I want to. Why don't I help you pack?" "There's no need." Yu opened the car door and slammed it shut. She hurried toward the lobby of the neighborhood. Li Jinan looked at her back with a smile. Yu swiped her card and entered the elevator. When she looked up, she saw her face in the mirror. Her cheeks were pink and her expression was the same as usual. There hadn't been much change. However, her heartbeat was a lot more erratic than usual. "From now on you'll live with me." Li Jinan's voice left no room for argument. Actually, he had planned this all along? *CK. Scheming *TC. His tricks are getting deeper and deeper. But Yu found him indescribably sexy. Crazy, ding. When the elevator arrived, Yu opened the door. The first thing she did was to drag out a suitcase. He packed up his belongings and clothes. There weren't many things, so he packed them up quickly. Yu looked at the time. Only 10 minutes had passed. This was too fast. If she went down now, would he think that she was too impatient? No, I can't give men this kind of feeling. Yu took a deep breath. She took her sweet time packing her shoes before slowly walking down the stairs. Li Jinan's car was parked at the side. When he saw Yu, he drove over. Looking at the time, 20 minutes had passed. She stuffed the suitcase into the trunk and got into the front passenger seat. "Let's go back to the house I'm living in now. After a few days, come home with me." Li Jinan started the car slowly. His movements were methodical, but the words that came out of his mouth shocked everyone. "Huh?" Yu found it hard to believe. "Are you going to see your family?" "I don't think it's a good idea. There's nothing bad about it. You'll have to face it sooner or later anyway. My grandfather wants to see you." Chapter 1500. I don't think it's a good idea. Yu deliberated over her words and said, "Isn't it a little too early to meet your parents?" "It's fine. Don't feel pressured. Just treat it as a new friend. My grandfather is easy to get along with." Li Jinan smiled and glanced at her. "You don't have to meet anyone else if you don't want to, but my parents aren't easy to deal with. They don't know that I have a girlfriend yet. They're still trying to arrange a blind date for me." "A blind date?" "Yeah, a blind date." Yu frowned. "How could that be?" "Don't worry. I won't go," Li Jinan replied. Yu felt as if her thoughts had been read. She felt a little uncomfortable and said, "Who cares? You can go if you want." "Then I'll go?" Yu glared at him. Childish. Li Jinan was in a good mood. He drove in the direction of his villa. When he stopped the car, Yu realized how extravagant his place was. It was a huge villa of 600 to 700 square feet. It was a duplex with 3 stories. The greenery in the yard was very beautiful and clean. It was summer and there was a rose plant in the yard. It was healthy and beautiful. "Doesn't your conscience hurt living here alone?" Yu looked at the luxurious villa with a pained expression. "You're too wasteful, you evil capitalist." Li Jinan glanced at it and didn't think much of it. "It's not that bad. My second brother's villa is bigger than mine. When he lived alone, he even asked for a maid. I don't have any maids here." Yu was speechless. Evil capitalist. There were no maids in the house, but it was very clean. Yu walked in. The surroundings were spotless. It was clean and spacious. Regardless of whether it was the decoration or the furniture, everything was luxurious. What a waste. It's even more wasteful to live alone in such a big place than the Guan and Shin families. Li Jinan moved her suitcase to his room and said, "Come here." Yu stood at the door. Her dirty shoes didn't dare to enter. She opened the cabinet and found a pair of slippers before changing into them and stepping in. She followed Li Jinan up to the second floor and found his room to be very simple. There was a king-sized bed, a rug beside the bed, and a sofa. There was nothing else. The room was very empty. Li Jinan opened the walk-in closet. It was filled with men's clothes. All kinds of leather shoes were lined up in rows. All of them were black. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice that they weren't of the same style. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed. She silently went in to hang up her clothes and said, "I'm guessing that I'll have to spend a lot of time just cleaning this place every day." "You don't have to clean it. I hired a part-time worker to clean it once a day." Yi Yu replied, "Evil capitalists." Li Jinan chuckled. "You hate the rich." As Yi Yu hung up her clothes, she felt helpless. "You're so rich. I'm so afraid that people will say that I'm only with you for your money." Li Jinan hugged her from behind and whispered, "How could you be such a shallow person? We don't even know that." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Yi Yu felt a little more at ease, but he continued, "You're with me because I'm big and skilled. Compared to that, what's money?" Yi Yu felt a little relieved. How shameless can you be? Chapter 1501. Yi Yu's body trembled at the touch of his hand. But she quickly reacted and slapped his hand away, saying, "No, let go." Li Jinan didn't let go. He tightened his hold on her. It was as if he wanted to constrict her to his bones and blood. He asked, "Then why?" Yi Yu was about to speak when he leaned forward and gently sucked on her earlobe. "Ah." Yi Yu wriggled slightly. "My clothes." "I'm not done hanging them." Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't heard her. He carried her out of the closet and threw her onto the bed. He leaned forward and kissed her on the lips. Everyone wore simple clothes for the summer. Yi Yu was only wearing a thin white t-shirt. Li Jinan reached out and easily ripped it off. He tossed it aside. As her lips fell, Yi Yu felt uneasy all over as she said, "Slow down." The sky was still bright and Yi Yu felt ashamed. The brightness around her made her feel uneasy. She pushed him a little and said, "Can we wait for tonight?" "Not good." Li Jinan unbuttoned her jeans. Li Jinan seemed to be addicted to the game. Not only did he not stop moving, but he also became more and more unscrupulous. Yi Yu couldn't take it anymore and pressed his hand down. "If you're going to do it, then hurry up. Why are you touching me?" Li Jinan laughed out loud and said, "Help me undress." "Take them off yourself." "Help me?" "No." "Then let me help you." "Hey, go away." "I don't." The afternoon was the best time to take a nap. The king-sized bed swayed, the man's low panting, the woman's low moans, and other discordant sounds filled the entire room. After the final push, both of them were drenched in sweat. Li Jinan lay on top of Yi Yu and whispered, "This is the first time this bed has undergone such a test of quality." Yi Yu was speechless. "It looks like the quality is not bad." Li Jinan wasn't in a hurry to leave. He squinted at her. Yi Yu's face was already flushed. At that moment, she felt uncomfortable under his gaze. She turned her head away and kicked him. "Get lost." Li Jinan didn't move. "Rest for a while. You can get lost later." "I told you to get lost." Li Jinan closed his eyes and pretended to be dead. "I didn't hear you." "I didn't hear you." Yi Yu stared at the ceiling speechlessly. She raised her hand to wipe it away. It was sweaty. With a look of disgust, he said, "It's so hot. I'm going to take a bath." Li Jinan opened his eyes. He was instantly energized. He pulled her along and said, "Let's go." Yi Yu had a bad feeling about this. By the time she reacted, he had already picked her up and carried her into the bathroom. When Yi Qianqian got home from work, she could immediately tell that something was wrong. Yi Yu's belongings were all gone. *CK. Yi Qianqian had a bad feeling about this. That wretched girl can't have run away from home, can she? Yi Qianqian was shocked by herself. She picked up her phone and called Yi Yu, but no one answered for a long time. He made another call and the call was connected. "Yu Yu? Where did you go?" However, it wasn't Yi Yu who answered. Instead, it was the voice of a man. "She's with me. She's asleep." Chapter 1502. Yi Qianshan held the phone in her hand and froze for a second, then two. Then he reacted and said, "Holy shit, she moved to your place?" Li Jinan lay on the bed and looked at the woman who was sleeping soundly in his arms. He replied, "Well, it might be a little hard for you to be alone in the future." Yi Qianshan was speechless. "Oh, so what if you have a partner?" This was discrimination. "If it wasn't for me, would you even have a partner?" Yi Qianshan cursed Li Jinan 1,000 times over in her heart, but she didn't dare to express her displeasure verbally. She quickly replied, "Yes, yes, yes. I'll be counting on you to take care of my Yu in the future. GM Li, if she doesn't treat you well, don't hold back. Please contact me. I'll teach her a lesson for you." Li Jinan smiled and replied, "Yeah. Thank you. I'm hanging up." "Yes, yes, yes. Goodbye, President Li." Even Yi Qianshan herself felt that she was a coward, but the moment she hung up the phone she screamed, "It's done." Ah. You really wanted to find someone to share such a big thing with? Yi Qianshan immediately dialed Yu Lily's number. The call was answered very quickly. "Hello. Lily. Let me tell you, Yi Yu and Li Jinan are together." Yu Lily was shocked. She asked, "What?" "Ah. Let me tell you, I've never wanted anyone to be with anyone so much. *CK Li Jinan is really fast." Yi Qianshan was on the verge of screaming. "The last time you told me that you could help Yu get a divorce, it was a success in just a few days. In the end, a few days ago you told me that you were going to kidnap Yu back home. I didn't expect you to succeed again. This third young Master Li is a god." When Yu Lily heard Yi Qianshan's words, which sounded almost like worship, she found it a little funny. She turned the phone on speaker and drew as she replied, "Of course. The Li family is full of freaks. That Li Xiqing is also very powerful. Wow, why don't I have such a Prince Charming? I'm so envious." Yi Qianshan was on the verge of tears. Why is the person by my side always ugly? Even if he doesn't have money, it's fine if he's good looking. Yu Lily didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Do you have a man by your side? Don't overestimate your current circle. There isn't even a single male. Yi Qianshan felt as if she had received 100,000 blows. She shouted in grief and indignation, "Can we still be friends? Can't you have some sympathy?" "I'm sorry. Trust me, you'll find your true love one day. You should be the main character. Good luck." Yi Qianshan was speechless. "Honey, hurry up and bring the quintuplets over for dinner." Oming's voice pierced through the air. Yi Qianshan was speechless. Yu Lily shouted, "I'm coming." She then turned to Yi Qianshan and said, "I'm going to eat. My husband is calling me." Quintuplets? Yi Qianshan thought she had misheard. Did Oming just say quintuplets? Yeah. Yu Lily felt ashamed. This guy has been fantasizing all this time. We haven't found out yet. Yi Qianshan replied, "How dare you? Goodbye, big belly woman. Goodbye, bachelor dog." Yi Qianshan felt as if she had been stabbed twice in the chest. It seemed that calling Yu Lily was wrong. Suddenly his phone vibrated. It was WeChat. "Shinjilia, have you eaten?" Yi Qianshan had originally wanted to come back and find Yi Yu to eat together. She hadn't expected Yi Yu to be so heartless as to abandon her and run away. Chapter 1503. Shinjilia, why? Sisai, cry. My heart hurts, I want to eat meat. Shinjilia. Didn't you say you were full of anger? Sisai, turn grief and anger into appetite. Shinjilia, where are you? Sisai, at home. Shinjilia, I'll pick you up. Let's go to the same place we had last time. The food was pretty good. Yi Qianshan snorted. Okay. After replying to Shinjilia's message, Yi Qianshan immediately opened her WeChat moments and posted a status. I'm a bully, a bully, a bully. Why did you abandon me? All of you just left after sleeping with me. Did you ever think about my feelings? The accompanying picture was of a crispy fried chicken pointing at its chest and asking, doesn't your conscience hurt? As soon as it was posted, it received many likes in less than a minute. *CK. What kind of attitude are those who liked it? I'm already so miserable. Why did they like it? Yi Yu was annoyed and pointed her finger at it. Someone in the know immediately left a comment. Ha! You're the only one left. Pity Angie. Artist, AB, ha! Artist, ha! Editor Shuangyao, ha! Yi Qianshan gave up. She had posted it on WeChat moments for comfort, but all she got in return was a bunch of gloating. Her heart hurt, her phone vibrated. It was Shinjilia. Come down. Yi Qianshan finally found some comfort. At least there was a single dog like her. She could at least get a free meal. Yi Qianshan grabbed her bag and walked out the door. When she got downstairs, she saw Shinjilia's car from afar. It was a very common car. It was a Volkswagen brand that was commonly seen on the streets, but it was well maintained. Yi Qianshan opened the car door and let out a long breath. Let's go. Barbecue? No. Let's go for barbecue. Yi Qianshan looked like she was ready to risk everything. Anyway, it's like this. Barbecue and beer. Shinjilia laughed. You've really given up on yourself. Yi Qianshan became even angrier. Mind your own business. Let's go. All right. Shinjilia drove slowly. Yi Qianshan found a kebab shop that had a good reputation and ordered a bunch of things the moment she entered. Finally, she opened her mouth and said, "A dozen draft beers. Can you drink it?" Shinjilia was doubtful. If you can't, then don't force yourself. I don't want to carry you back. Tisk. Yi Qianshan's face was full of disdain. When I was drinking, you were still drinking milk. I'm 2 years older than you. Yi Qianshan looked at him with even more contempt and said, You're exaggerating. Don't you know how to use metaphors? How uncultured. Shinjilia was speechless and said, Give me 2 bottles of herbal tea. I'm driving. The waiter nodded. All right, the order has been placed. Please wait a moment. The skewers were soon served and so were the beers. She slapped the table and suddenly hissed, How could it be like this? There were no signs at all. I'm so hurt. Yi Qianshan gulped it down in big mouthfuls. You moved away? Yi Qianshan pursed her lips and nodded her head in grief and indignation. She said, Yes, she moved away. If Lily moved away, then so be it. She had an affair with Oming to begin with. As for Yu, all right, it's normal for her to move away. She has to pursue her own happiness. She's with Li Jinan now? Shinjilia asked as he ate the meat. Are they living together? Yi Qianshan took a big gulp of beer and nodded her head vigorously. Yes, they're living together. So you're living alone? Yeah. There's still an empty room. Give it to me. Chapter 1504. Yi Qianshan was drinking when she heard what he said. She suddenly choked and coughed violently. She spat out the wine in her mouth and it fell onto the small plate in front of her. Shinjilia couldn't bear to look at it. He pulled out a tissue and handed it to her. Can't you be more careful? Yi Qianshan took the tissue and said, Are you F***king crazy? How could I live with you? Why not? We're not even in the same room. Shinjilia looked at her with disdain. Don't worry. I'm not interested in you. It's just that it's been too difficult to find a place to live. Your house happens to be close to the hospital. Isn't that perfect? I can sleep a little more every day and feel better. Yi Qianshan sneered. Aren't you rich? Rent a place in my neighborhood. That's too troublesome. I still have to buy furniture and decorate the place. I can just go to your house. Everything is for your own use. At least it'll be clean. That makes sense. After all, there aren't many people in this world who are as obsessed with cleanliness as I am. Yi Qianshan agreed. But I don't think it's appropriate for us to live together. After all, you used to be my sister's uncle. If my sister comes back, it'll be awkward. What's the big deal? It's fine. Why are you afraid of that? Shinjilia took a bite of the skewer and said with disdain, I thought you weren't afraid of anything. Why are you afraid of embarrassment? I'm afraid that you'll be embarrassed. It's okay. I don't mind. Shinjilia smiled. Let's just leave it at that. I've been staying in a hotel recently. It's inconvenient. Huh? You're staying in a hotel? Yi Qianshan was a little confused. Your hospital can assign you a car. Why don't you assign you a staff dormitory? The staff dormitory is terrible. There are too many people and it's dirty and smelly. I can't stand it. Shinjilia gave her a lamb skewer and said, I get off work early. I get off work at 5 o'clock. After that, I'll go to the market to buy some groceries. You can eat when you come back. Yi Qianshan's eyes lit up. This was a real benefit. Although Shinjilia's culinary skills weren't as good as Lily's, he was much better than her. Then I won't pay for the groceries. I'll take it as your rent. She took a bite of the lamb skewer and said, Also, you'll have to buy those unnecessary things too. Laundry detergent, paper towels, and the like. You have to remember that in the past, Lily was the one who bought them and then you. I'm busy. Shinjilia laughed. It's fine if your brain isn't working. Why are you still busy? Busy my asterisk. No matter what, I'm still busier than you. Now that you're awesome and free, I'm still struggling at the bottom. Yi Qianshan fiercely bit into the meat and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Besides, this is what you should be doing. I'm the landlord and I'm the landlady. Yes, yes, yes. Whatever you say. More. Shinjilia stuffed a skewer into her hand and snatched the glass away. Don't drink so much. What do you know? Alcohol is good for the skin. Look at how good my skin is. It's smooth and tender. Yi Qianshan touched her face and raised her eyebrows. Shinjilia replied, that's because the oil got on it. Yi Qianshan glared at him and ignored him. After finishing the skewer, Yi Qianshan almost couldn't walk. Her stomach was bloated, and she held onto Shinjilia's arm the entire way to the car. When they reached home, Yi Qianshan thought that Shinjilia would go straight back to the hotel. Unexpectedly, he took out his luggage from the trunk and said, let's go. Yi Qianshan was dumbfounded. King prepared this a long time ago? Chapter 1505. Yi Qianshan's face was a little red because she had drunk some beer. When Shinjilia saw her reaction, he locked the car and reached out to pull her inside. Yi Qianshan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She struggled free and immediately caught up to him. She said, hey, you've already planned this all along. You're here to freeload off me. Shinjilia snorted and replied, you freeload off me for food, but I'm freeloading off you for a place to stay. It's very expensive to stay in a hotel. How much is my monthly salary? If I stay in a hotel for a day, it'll cost me more than $1,000. I can't afford it at all. DMN, a hotel that costs more than $1,000. You're staying at a 5-star hotel, aren't you? You're so poor, yet you still refuse to stop. Serves you right. Yi Qianshan followed him into the elevator. Yi Qianshan had thought that he would only be moving in the next day. Now that he was moving in all of a sudden, she was caught off guard and found it hard to accept. After entering the elevator, Yi Qianshan suddenly felt conflicted and said, Shinjilia, why don't we? At that moment, Yi Qianshan's cell phone rang, and the rest of her words were stuck in her mouth. It was Yi Yuyu. Yi Yuyu seemed to have just woken up. Her voice sounded sluggish as she asked, hey, were you looking for me? When Yi Qianshan heard Yi Yuyu's words, she was a little angry and retorted, King? Why didn't you tell me that you were moving? That's too much. She stretched and her thigh brushed against Li Jinan's body as she said, I forgot. He reached out and hugged her. In a low voice he asked, are you hungry? Ding. When the elevator reached the station, Yi Qianshan heard the man's deliberately lowered voice. She was speechless. She looked at the time and said, it's already 9 o'clock. Don't tell me you haven't eaten yet. I haven't eaten yet. I'm hungry. Yi Yuyu rubbed her tummy. That's all for now. I'm going to eat. Bye. Yi Qianshan was speechless. How did things turn out this way? Could it be that she was already despised by so many people? Shinjilia reached out. Yi Qianshan held the phone in her hand. She looked as if she had been abandoned by the entire world. She felt a little regretful. She looked at him and asked, do you really want to stay at my place? Shinjilia asked, what do you think? From the looks of it, yes. Yi Qianshan was on the verge of tears. She was filled with regret. Is it too late for me to back out now? What do you think? Looks like I won't make it in time. Shinjilia smiled, revealing a row of pearly white teeth. He extended his hand and said, the key. Yi Qianshan reluctantly handed the keys over and said, let me tell you, I'm very arrogant at home. I even sleepwalk. I'm afraid I'll scare you in the middle of the night. It's okay. I'm a doctor. I can treat you. I can even sing in the middle of the night. It's very unpleasant. It doesn't matter. I can sing too. Shall we sing together? Can't you at least show a little bit of fear? Yi Qianshan was so annoyed that she almost flipped the table. Shinjilia turned to look at her. He thought for a moment and said, why don't you try to scare me by pretending to be a ghost? Maybe I'll be scared. Sure, just you wait. Shinjilia suddenly frowned and looked at her for a while before saying, forget it. You already look like a ghost. It'll be awkward if I end up beautifying you. CKU. Yi Qianshan stormed into Yi Yuyu's room in exasperation. She made sure she hadn't missed anything before coming out. She didn't expect to hear Shinjilia's voice the moment she stepped out. CK. This cup is so small. Is it yours? Chapter 1506. When Yi Qianshan heard Shinjilia's words, she immediately ran in the direction of the sound. At a glance, she saw Shinjilia holding a drying rack with a small white bra hanging from it. Her face turned red. Yi Qianshan immediately ran over and snatched it away. Are you crazy? How can you look at a girl's underwear? You pervert. Shinjilia laughed even louder and said, "Hey, you were the one who hung it out here. I saw it the moment I came over. Don't blame me." *CK This is the balcony. Where do you want to hang your clothes if not on the balcony? Besides, this is my home. Yi Qianshan angrily declared her ownership and hid the bra behind her. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the underwear and a few socks and bra beside it. She moved her body to block his view. Shinjilia looked at her with contempt and said, "Why are you hiding? It's not like you can't see it." As he said that, he pointed 2 fingers at his eyes with his right hand and then moved them to Yi Qianshan's chest. He couldn't bear to look at it and shook his head. Yi Qianshan was furious and shouted, "Shinjilia!" As she shouted, she extended her leg and kicked him. She flung the bra in her hand at him and said, "Pervert! Pervert! Get out!" Shinjilia shrank back from the hit and quickly waved his hands. "I was just joking. No matter how small it is, it's still bigger than me." As he said that, he pulled his collar down and revealed his well-defined abs. When Yi Qianshan saw it, she gritted her teeth in anger and shouted, "Get out! I'm a woman and you're a man. How dare you compare me to you?" Shinjilia looked like he suddenly realized something and said, "So you're a woman?" Yi Qianshan gritted her teeth in anger, but just as she raised her hand, Shinjilia ran out and said, "Ha! I'm going to tidy up the room." Yi Qianshan looked at his back and was a little flustered. Her teeth chattered. She took a deep breath and slowly said, "I absolutely can't let him move in." Shinjilia didn't know what Yi Qianshan was thinking at that moment. He carried his luggage in and immediately began to tidy up his things. Yu had used a pink bedsheet cover. Shinjilia tore it all off and replaced it with his own dark gray bedsheet. After everything was sorted out, Shinjilia began to tidy up the decorations and other things in the room. Yi Qianshan thought for a long time outside. When she finally thought of a way to drive him away, she finally pushed the door open. However, as soon as he entered the door, he was shocked by the different things inside. The single sofa that had been on the left side of the door had been moved. Not only had the sofa been moved, but even the table that Lily often used to draw had been moved. A small table lamp made of vines was placed on it. The warm yellow light shone out and the whole room became a little romantic. There was a large pile of books on the desk, and the small bookshelf on it had long been filled up. They were in a completely different world. For the first time, Yi Qianshan felt that a psychiatrist was different from other people. She was a little surprised. Chapter 1507. Yi Qianshan was a little embarrassed when she heard that. She laughed and waved her hands. "Why would I? Do you want to take a shower? I still have hot water." "What?" With that, Yi Qianshan closed the door, turned around and scurried back to her room. She immediately thought of the clothes she had left hanging on the balcony. She opened the door again and swept everything away as quickly as possible. Shinjilia was in a good mood. He found a pair of shorts and went to the bathroom. The shower gel in the bathroom was floral. Shinjilia took one look and put it down in disgust. He rinsed himself with cold water and walked out. Shinjilia didn't have a towel and he didn't dry himself. He walked out with his upper body bare. Yi Qianshan happened to be walking out of her room. When she saw Shinjilia's state, she was a little flustered. She immediately shouted for him to stop and said, "Can't you put on some clothes? It's not good to walk around like that." Shinjilia didn't care. "It's such a hot day. You don't have to wear anything. I'm busy. I don't usually come out. Don't worry." Yi Qianshan was a little angry. She went to take a shower and dried her hair with a towel. She returned to her room as quickly as she could. For some reason she felt a little embarrassed. *CK. If it's always like this in the future, how am I going to live? Li Jinan and Yi Yu didn't have dinner, so they naturally went out for supper later that night. It was getting late. There wasn't much to eat nearby. Li Jinan didn't have the habit of cooking his own food, so he had to drive to the city. Yi Yu's body was a little sore. After ordering something with Li Jinan, she obediently sat down. She hadn't expected to run into an old acquaintance even at a supper. There was a particularly gossipy woman in Yi Yu's department. Her surname was Chiu, and she was known as Gossip Woman Chiu. That gossip woman Chiu had once had a conflict with Yi Yu and another colleague, Xiao Su, at the entrance of the company. In the end, Yi Yu was taken away by Li Jinan, and the matter was left unresolved. At that moment, Gossip Woman Chiu hadn't expected to meet Yi Yu there. What was even more unexpected was that she would meet someone even more important, Li Jinan. When Gossip Woman Chiu saw them, she found it hard to believe. She leaned over and exclaimed, "Jim Li?" When Li Jinan and Yi Yu heard that, they immediately turned their heads. When Gossip Chio saw that it was really them, she became excited and said, "It's been a long time. You're also here to eat? A few of my colleagues and I also came here for dinner. Are you guys together?" Yu didn't feel like talking to him. She glanced at him and lowered her head to drink her tea. However, Li Jinan was not that kind of person. He looked at her and asked, "You are?" Yu almost spat out a mouthful of tea. She felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. For a moment, the gossipy Chio was a little embarrassed. She chuckled and said, "President Li, you really like to joke. I'm Xiao Chio from the administrative department, haha." When Li Jinan heard that, he nodded his head and said, "Hello." Gossip Chio was even more embarrassed. She laughed and said, "Then I won't disturb you anymore. I'm leaving." Li Jinan nodded. "Take care." Gossip woman Chio's face turned ugly, but she could only leave with her tail between her legs, feeling somewhat indignant in her heart. Chapter 1508. Everyone was the same kind of person. Those who were able to hang out together were all people with a lot to talk about. When they heard Chio's words, everyone turned their heads curiously and asked, "What did you see? Why are you so agitated?" "I just saw Yu. She's the Yu from our department. She used to be an artist, but she retired from the entertainment industry because of an injury. She was originally the second female lead in a very popular script. Do you still remember her?" Chio tried her best to remind everyone. "How could I not remember her? Everyone says that she's GM Lee's mistress. Did you see her cheating on him?" Chio slammed her fist down and replied, "I didn't, but I'm guessing that it's true that she's GM Lee's mistress. I just saw them together. They were sitting together and they looked very intimate. Furthermore, they're having supper together at this time. Their relationship is definitely not simple." "Didn't you ask?" someone asked. Chio was a little unhappy. She replied sourly, "How would I dare? My relationship with Yu isn't good to begin with. If I speak to her again, she'll give me the cold shoulder. It'll be ugly." In reality, she had really been given the cold shoulder, and the situation had been very awkward. Chio knew her place. She didn't dare to go again, but others did. When everyone heard Chio's words, they began to ask around. After telling them the exact location, they formed groups of 2 or 3 and went to take a peek. When they peeked, they really did see Li Jinan and Yu. At this moment, they were eating in a corner, looking very quiet. For such a high-end supper restaurant, business was booming. There were many people coming and going. Yu didn't realize that she was being peeked at. Li Jinan could sense it clearly. He said, "Look at your 10 o'clock. Who's that?" Yu was eating when she looked up. With one glance, she saw a former colleague. Suddenly, Yu felt a little impatient. She said, "My former colleague. He's in cahoots with Chio. There's an 80% chance that he's secretly taking photos to spread rumors in the office." "What rumors can he spread?" Yu laughed coldly. "What kind of rumors can they come up with? It's nothing more than unspoken rules or being kept as a mistress. That's all there is to it. These people have nothing better to do. Instead, they spend all day gossiping. They're full of trouble." When Li Jinan heard that, he nodded his head and said, "Give me the name later." Yu nearly choked on her food. She looked up at him in disbelief and asked, "What do you want?" "My company can't afford to hire idlers. In other words, drive it?" Yu secretly clicked her tongue and said, "They're involved in nepotism. You have to do a thorough investigation." "I didn't expect it to be so easy." Li Jinan took a mouthful of rice and said, "It's fine. Leave it to my assistant. Send me the name later and I'll get someone to do it." Yuyu's heart was filled with envy. She clicked her tongue and said, "Being a boss is so capricious." "You can be willful," Li Jinan said with a smile. "In the future, you can fire anyone you don't like as long as you're happy." "I won't." Although that was what Yuyu said, the corners of her lips couldn't help but curl up in a smile. Chapter 1509. Shenluo, and sat beside Guan Kui's bed. Guan Kui had already fallen asleep. Her even breathing could be heard. She looked very peaceful. Although her face was a little pale, her delicate features were very beautiful. Guan Kui's hand held onto Shenluo, Anne's hand tightly. It was as if she was afraid that he would escape from her sleep. Shenluo, Anne was looking at the formulas of various medicines and analyzing their pharmacology. Suddenly his phone rang. It was from a friend in Kingstown. It was rare to see him, but they were on good terms. When Shenluo Anne saw it, he wanted to answer it, but he struggled against Guan Kui's hand. When he realized that he couldn't escape, he gave up and hung up. He replied with a text message. Someone is sleeping. What's wrong? The reply came quickly. I'm having supper. Do you know who I met? Shen Luo, and asked. Who? The reply, Yi Yu, your wife. Big brother, you have a green field above your head. From the looks of it, their relationship isn't just 1 or 2 days old. Your field is probably already so thick that it's already shaded. When he read the reply, Shen Luo, and stared at it for a moment and didn't know what to say. A green field above my head? That's not all. Following that, the other party quickly sent over a multimedia message. The picture was quickly uploaded. Yi Yu was sitting on a chair eating. Her smile was sweet and her face was rosy. She looked very happy. A man was sitting across from Yi Yu. He had a healthy, wheat-colored complexion and he was very tall. His facial features were very exquisite, and he looked very healthy and strong. Shen Luo, and was very familiar with this man. Who else could it be but Li Jinan? When he saw that face, Shen Luo, and gripped his phone tightly and gritted his teeth in anger. He stared at the picture on his phone. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Indeed, it's already a green field. Even before their divorce, he had suspected that there was something going on between them. If there wasn't a problem, why would Li Jinan come all the way to the capital to instigate Guan Kui? If there wasn't a problem, why would Li Jinan hire a lawyer to sue him for all the dark deeds he had done behind everyone's backs when he knew they were already married? Why would he insist on using their divorce as a bargaining chip? In just a few short months, everything had changed. At that time, if he refused to get a divorce, not to mention the Guan family making a fuss, he would not be able to escape a dispute because of what he had done before. Right now, he couldn't afford any more trouble. The least costly way was to divorce Yi Yu. He had originally thought that their marriage was just a relationship in name only. However, after the divorce, Shen Luo, and discovered that things were far from that simple. Especially when he saw this photo, he was even more furious. It had only been a few days since their divorce, and Yi Yu had openly slept with Li Jinan. She had even claimed that there was nothing between them? Oh, whore. Shen Luo, and squeezed out these 2 words from between his teeth. However, in the deepest part of his heart, something inexplicable was quietly sprouting and spreading to his heart. This was heartache, unwillingness, and jealousy. Guan Kui was in the midst of her sweet dreams when she felt her hands suddenly tighten. Her brows furrowed tightly as she opened her eyes. Chapter 15:10. When he heard Guan Kui's voice, Shen Luo, An's emotions were like a bomb that had been set ablaze. His mind was suddenly engulfed in flames. Shen Luo, and released Guan Kui's hand and immediately stood up. Shen Luo, An's behavior frightened Guan Kui. Looking at the man beside her, Guan Kui was at a loss and said, Luo, and Shen Luo, and finally realized that he had lost his composure. After calming himself down, he said, I'm going to the bathroom. Guan Kui looked at him and smiled warmly as she nodded her head. Shen Luo, and strode out of the bathroom and closed the door behind him. The smile on Guan Kui's face disappeared. Her gaze landed on the phone that Shen Luo, and had just put down. She reached out and took the phone from him. Following her memory, she unlocked the phone and saw the page on the phone. It was a picture of Yi Yu and that person. Guan Kui stared at the picture. She understood why Shen Luo, and had lost his composure. Yi Yu. Shen Luo, and is still thinking about Yi Yu? How is that possible? What's so good about Yi Yu? Why had he been thinking about her since so many years ago? Why hadn't he ever seen her? Now that I've finally managed to tie him to my side and we're finally going to have our wedding, why does Yi Yu have to appear again? The jealousy that had been buried deep in her heart couldn't be suppressed and surged up. Suddenly the door to the washroom opened. Guan Kui immediately locked the phone and put it back. When she saw Shen Luo, and the smile on Guan Kui's face froze. She said, Luo, and our wedding is almost here. Since it's less than a month away, why don't we go get our marriage certificate first? Guan Kui's words shocked Shen Luo. Get our marriage certificate? With me at this time? Shen Luo, and felt that it was inappropriate. The resistance in his heart grew. He looked at Guan Kui. When he saw the pale and weak smile on her face, his first thought was of Yi Yu. If it weren't for Yi Yu, Guan Kui's life wouldn't be like this. Based on Guan Kui's excellence, she could live a better life than Yi Yu. He wanted to atone for Yi Yu. He wanted to make it up to Guan Kui. That was what Yi Yu owed him, and it was also what he owed her. However, that was what his rationality told him, but the resistance in his heart grew stronger. Shen Luo, and looked at her for a long time before saying, "You've been doing well recently, but it's still not suitable for you to go out. I'll take you out when you're discharged, okay? Be good." The smile on Guan Kui's face froze. She nodded her head and replied, "All right, I'll listen to you. I heard that Mommy and Daddy have already drafted a guest list. We've even invited Yu. Although she's the one who caused me to end up like this, she's still my sister. She should be invited to my wedding. Don't you agree, Luo? And invite Yu to the wedding?" Shen Luo and was momentarily stunned. After a long time he said, "You can decide. I don't mind." Guan Kui smiled brightly and said, "I knew you were the most considerate. Luo, and come here." Chapter 15:11. As Guan Kui spoke, she wrapped her arms around Shen Luo An's neck and stared at him. Shen Luo An's body froze. He stiffened. Guan Kui could sense it clearly. She tightened her arms around him and asked softly, "Luo, and you haven't forgotten her? Is this her that I know or that I know her? Regardless of which she is, I'll never forget her. One is my first love, and the other is my first night." Shen Luo and didn't know how to answer her. He turned to look at her. Guan Kui met his gaze and reached out to caress his face. She said, "Luo, and we're getting married next month." Shen Luo An's emotions were complicated. He looked at Guan Kui and replied, "I know. Don't worry. It won't affect our wedding." Luo An. Guan Kui reached out and hugged Shen Luo An. In a low voice she said, "If you don't want to marry me, let's just leave it at that." "No," Shen Luo An interrupted her. He lowered his head and kissed her on the cheek. "There's no such thing. Don't think too much." Guan Kui felt wronged and asked, "Then why don't you want me?" "I know my figure isn't good. I've been bedridden all these years and I haven't developed well. I already said don't think too much." Shen Luo An rebuked her. His tone was stern as he interrupted her. "I just want to save the best for our wedding night." Shen Luo An's eyes were serious as he looked at Guan Kui and said, "Isn't the best thing for a girl the first time?" He planted a gentle kiss between her eyebrows and said softly, "Let's wait until our wedding night before we leave behind the most beautiful things, okay?" Guan Kui didn't believe him. When she saw Shen Luo An's serious expression, all her doubts were dispelled. She looked at Shen Luo An and nodded her head. She snuggled into Shen Luo An's arms and said, "Okay. I hope that everything will go smoothly. I hope that when the time comes Shen Luo An will be completely disappointed in Yu. If I can't have it, no one else can have it." At the same time, no one else could even dream of getting what was hers. Hatred rose in Guan Kui's heart. However, it was all buried in that warm embrace, unable to see the light of day. Yu woke up early in the morning. When she opened her eyes, the sky had just brightened. Li Jinan slept beside her. His breathing was even and his arms circled her in his embrace. Their movements were intimate and there was no gap between them. When Yu saw him, she felt a little relieved. Eileen Chang once said, "The shortcut to a woman's heart is sex." In just a few days, an indescribable relationship had been forged between them. For the first time, Yu clearly understood that they were already together. However, he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. She gently nudged him and called out, "Li Jinan." He reached out and pulled her into his arms. His eyes were still tightly shut as he asked, "What's wrong?" His voice was low and hoarse as if he had just woken up. When Yu heard that voice, the softest part of her heart softened. She wrapped her arms around his narrow waist and said, "Are we really going to your house today? I'm not ready yet. Let's not go, okay?" Chapter 15:12. Li Jinan hadn't opened his eyes the entire time. When he heard Yuyu's words, his lips curled up in a smile as he asked, "What do you think?" "Looks like it won't work." Yuyu felt wronged and replied, "I'm scared." "What are you afraid of?" Li Jinan raised his thigh and clamped it between her legs as he asked, "Are you afraid that I'll abandon you after making use of you?" As he spoke, he rubbed his stubbled chin against her face. Yuyu turned her head away in disgust and replied, "I'm afraid that your parents won't like me. Besides, don't you think it's too soon for us to meet our parents?" "Who told you that I'm going to see my parents?" Li Jinan chuckled and opened his eyes. That pair of eyes, pitch black and bright, appeared especially dazzling under the bright light of the surroundings. Yi was caught off guard. Her heart skipped a beat and her heart raced. Li Jinan leaned in slightly and sucked on her lips as he said, "I'll take you to see my grandfather." "Is it different?" Yi Yu turned her head away and smacked him. With a look of disdain she said, I haven't brushed my teeth. Don't kiss me. When Li Jinan heard that, he didn't avoid it. Instead, he leaned in closer and said, Great. You despise me? The large hand directly lifted the blanket and said, I'll let you have a taste of my prowess. As he spoke, his fingers were placed under her armpit, and scrupulously playing tricks. Yi Yu was ticklish. As soon as she touched her, she shrank back. She laughed loudly and begged for mercy. No, don't touch me. If it's too late. After washing up, it was already past 9 in the morning. Yi Yu made some simple breakfast. When she brought it to the dining table, Li Jinan was on the phone. Looking at the delicious breakfast, he suddenly felt a sense of happiness in his heart. The corners of Li Jinan's mouth turned up as he spoke into the phone. Soon. Give me an hour and I'll be home in no time. Yi Yu heard the voice on the other end of the line explode. What? An hour? You think this old man is easy to bully? You said you would come this morning. What time is it now? The voice on the other side of the phone was old, but it was full of energy and had a very dignified aura. Yi Yu didn't have to guess to know who the person was. Li Jinan put the phone away and made sure that there was no more talking on the other side. Then he said, That's it. Goodbye, Grandpa. Old Captain Li Sun seemed to want to say something, but Li Jinan quickly hung up. He didn't show any mercy. Yi Yu sat in front of Li Jinan and asked, Your grandfather? Yeah, they're rushing me. There's no rush. Take your time. Li Jinan ate his breakfast unhurriedly. Yi Yu harumphed. With a grandson like you, your grandfather will probably be furious. My grandfather is always proud of me. Li Jinan boasted shamelessly. However, the military might of my family can only rely on my big brother. I still have to get married and have children. What kind of twisted logic is that? Yi Yu scoffed. She couldn't help but laugh. Didn't your big brother marry a wife and have children? You're already 30 years old. How old is your eldest brother? Recommending the new book, 99 Days of Hidden Marriage. Minister, please be reserved. On the surface, he was a cold-hearted young master who was loyal to his country, but in secret, he was an all-powerful and mysterious monarch. She calculated every step of the way and cheated him of all his firsts. Then she left all his assets and ran away. Who knew that the next day she would be brought to the church at knife point? He announced loudly, Marry or die. Marry, marry, marry. I'll marry, all right? Chapter 15:13. What kind of logic is that? Yi Yu scoffed. She couldn't help but laugh. Hasn't your older brother married and had children? You're already 30. How old is your older brother? My older brother. Li Jinan did a quick calculation. 34. His wedding is at the end of the month. When he's done, it'll be our turn. Yi Yu was caught off guard when she heard that. She looked up at Li Jinan. Li Jinan was focused on his breakfast. When he noticed her gaze, he looked up and asked, What's the matter? Do you really want to marry me? Yi Yu found it a little too sudden. Everything had happened so quickly that it was unbelievable. Li Jinan gave her a look that said, You're talking nonsense. He replied, If I don't marry you, I'll be behaving like a hooligan if I sleep with you. If my grandfather finds out, I'll be punished. It's such a thick braid. As he spoke, he raised 2 fingers. Not only is it thick, but it's also soaked in oil. It's no laughing matter. Years ago, I was beaten by it until I was hospitalized for several days. The pain was so severe that I couldn't even take care of myself. Yi Yu clicked her tongue when she heard that and asked, Your family is so strict? Of course. Li Jinan couldn't bear to recall the past. When he thought of the whip, he felt uncomfortable. Why were you punished in the past? Yi Yu propped her chin on her hand and looked at him curiously. Li Jinan took a sip of soy milk and replied, I retired. I didn't want to work anymore. My old man was furious. He whipped me more than 10 times. His words were spoken casually, but Yi Yu could tell that it wasn't as easy as he made it sound. Yi Yu lowered her head and continued eating her breakfast. She took a bite, but her mind was elsewhere. When Li Jinan saw her expression, he was amused. He looked at her with a half-smile and asked, You don't intend to marry me? Yi Yu paused in the act of eating. She looked up at him and replied, I just got divorced. I didn't expect it to be so soon. The smile on Li Jinan's face gradually faded. He slowly said, Right now we're only missing a marriage certificate. We've done everything that we should and shouldn't have done. His words were so blatant that Yi Yu felt conflicted. She said, It's not that simple, Jian Li. Li Jinan put down his chopsticks and looked at her. His eyes were dark and dangerous as he asked, "What did you call me? You've eaten your fill and now you want to wash your hands clean? How could it be so simple?" Yu Yu sensed that something was amiss. After a moment of silence she replied, "I'm used to it." "Correct yourself." Li Jinan's tone brooked no argument as he said, "You can't call me that in front of my grandfather. Anyway, I don't like it." Oh. Yu Yu took a sip of the soy milk. She couldn't bring herself to be in a good mood. She thought about it and said, "You said that your grandpa already knows, but do your parents know? Do they know that I'm divorced?" "I don't know. But they don't even know that I have a girlfriend. They will find out sooner or later. But for now I have to deal with the old one. The rest can be dealt with slowly." For a moment Yu Yu was at a loss for words. She asked, "Your grandfather looks like he's easy to talk to. Are you actually afraid of him?" Chapter 15-14. When Yu Yu heard that, she blinked her eyes and asked, "Your mother is difficult to deal with?" "Yeah." Li Jinan took a sip of soy milk and replied, "My grandfather's ideas have been wild for the past few years. In comparison, my mother has been more traditional since she was a child. She might not be able to accept some of the newer ideas and strange things. For example, Yu Yu's divorce. Based on Qin Shuhua's personality, she probably wouldn't be able to accept it. Even if she could, it would take some time and effort. The one with the most authority in the family was grandfather. As long as grandfather gave the word and allowed Yu Yu to be with him, even if Qin Shuhua had any objections, it wouldn't be as forceful. Li Jinan was well aware of that. From the very beginning, he had no intention of bringing Yu Yu to meet his parents. When Yu Yu heard Li Jinan's words, she began to worry and asked, "What if your mother finds out that I'm divorced? Won't that be troublesome?" "A little, but it's not a big problem. She'll accept it sooner or later." Li Jinan put down his cup and looked at Yu Yu. With a mischievous look in his eyes, he asked, "Are you worried about our marriage?" Yu Yu finally reacted. She blushed and said, "No way. I just feel that if she doesn't agree, it'll be troublesome." Li Jinan looked at her with a smile and said, "It's fine. Leave it to me. Let's go. The old man is waiting for us." "The old man?" When Yu Yu heard that, she chuckled. "Why do you call your grandfather that? Won't he beat you up if he hears that?" "I call him that in front of him too. He's done a lot of stupid things. My second brother hates him to death." Li Jinan shrugged and cleared the dishes. "I'll wash them when we get back." Yu Yu placed the dishes back in the sink and said, "It'll be quick. Give me a few minutes." Then she boiled the water and quickly washed the dishes. There weren't many dishes, but they were quick. When she was done, Yu Yu changed into her shoes and walked out the door. Li Jinan had already prepared the car. They locked the door and got into the car. By the time the two of them arrived at the old mansion, it had been almost an hour. The old man was already waiting in the living room. When he heard the doorbell ring, he immediately asked Lu Sa to open the door. Suppressing his desire to immediately stand up and see who it was, old Master Li sat on the sofa with great self-control. He looked at the door and stretched his neck. Very quickly Li Jinan walked in. When Lu Sa saw the girl behind Li Jinan, her eyes lit up and she said, "She's really pretty. Come on in." "This is Lu Sa," Li Jinan introduced. Yu Yu smiled and nodded. "Hello, Lu Sa." Lu Sa grinned and looked very happy. She said, "This is the first time third young master has brought a girl back. Come in and sit." "Lu Sa, get her a pair of shoes to change into," Li Jinan said. Lu Sa then reacted and said, "Look at me." Then he took out a new pair of slippers from the shoe cabinet. After putting them down, he looked in the direction of the sofa and said, "Old master, he's here." Old Master Li had stretched his neck to look forward, but when he heard Lu Sa's words, he immediately retracted his head and pretended not to see anything. He leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. When he heard Lu Sa's words, he lazily opened his eyes. It was as if he had just come back to his senses. He replied, "He's here. Come and sit." Yu Yu felt a little uneasy as she looked at Li Jinan. Chapter 15-15. Li Jinan gave her a look of encouragement and reached out to hold her hand. Yu Yu became even more nervous. Her heart started to race. She had long heard of old Captain Li Sun's reputation. Regardless of whether it was from the Shin family or Yi Zhenhua, everyone had a very good opinion of General Li Sun. Furthermore, he was very tall. Every time they mentioned him, Yu Yu's mind would be filled with the image of a stern and awe-inspiring man in armor. Although he was advanced in age, he still looked very imposing from afar. At a glance, he exuded authority without being angry. Yi Yu followed Li Jinan over with light footsteps. When they got closer, old Captain Li Sun opened his eyes wide and looked at Yi Yu. Yi Yu obediently greeted him. "Hello, old general." When old Captain Li Sun heard that, he nodded his head and replied, "Hello. Have a seat." Li Jinan cleared his throat and helped Yi Yu sit down on the sofa. He said, "Don't stand on ceremony. My grandfather isn't fierce. Just treat this as your own home." When Li Sun heard that, he nodded his head. "It's only me and Xiaoyou's wife in the house now. Don't be nervous. What's your name?" "My surname is Yi. My name is Yu." Yi Yu smiled. It was obvious that she was nervous. She reached out and pressed her palms together. She said, "My father asked me to send his regards to you. Thank you for saving his life all those years ago." Old Captain Li Sun hadn't expected Yi Yu to suddenly bring that up. He assumed that she was trying to worm her way into his good graces and asked, "Who is your father?" "He said that he hasn't seen you in many years," Yi Yu said. "I'm guessing that you've forgotten him. His name is Yi Zhenhua. He's the bad boy who drives geese in Yin Town." That was what Yi Zhenhua had told her to pass on. When old Captain Li heard that, he immediately remembered and asked, "Yi Huifeng's son, right?" When Yi Yu heard that, she immediately nodded her head and replied, "Yes." Li Sun laughed. "I didn't expect that kid's daughter to be all grown up. In the blink of an eye, more than a decade has passed. Time sure flies." Yi Yu looked at him with a smile. She reached out and grabbed Li Jinan's hand. Li Jinan squeezed her palm and said, "Grandpa, let me make you some tea." I'm coming." Lu Sa's water had just boiled and she said, "Second young master recently brought some Jin Junmei from an unknown place to the old master. He hasn't started brewing it yet." As she spoke, she put down 2 bags of tea leaves. She looked at Yi Yu with a smile in her eyes and asked, "How old are you, Miss Yi?" 25. "I thought you were 21 or 22. You look so young and fair. So pretty." Lu Sa smiled and looked at the old man. "Don't you think so?" The old man nodded. "That's right. However, Yi Zhenhua is quite rough. You probably took after your mother." Yi Yu nodded her head. "I do look more like my mother." Li Jinan had already started brewing tea. He warmed the tea set and said, "This is the girl I told you about. She's pretty, has a good personality and has a good heart. Everything about her is perfect." Old Captain Li harumphed. He couldn't resist smiling as he said, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Do you think I don't know you? If she's good, you're good in everything. If she's bad, you're bad in everything. Would you still want her?" As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yu. "This girl is indeed not bad. I also know her father and grandfather. They're both honest people." Chapter 15-16. Old Captain Li turned his head away and harumphed. "It's not up to me to decide. You'll have to depend on your mother. What do I say?" When Li Jinan saw that, he knew that old Captain Li had a good impression of Yi Yu. He quickly struck while the iron was hot and said, "Grandfather, you're the head of the family. If you don't have the final say, who does? I reckon that even if my mother finds out, she'll only object to it symbolically. The main decision is still in your hands. Come have some tea." Li Jinan courteously poured the tea and offered it to him with both hands. He said, "This is top-notch Jin Junmei. Chief Li loves it the most." Old Captain Li pouted slightly and turned his head away. The aroma of the tea wafted toward him, and he couldn't control it any longer. In the end, he reached out and took the teacup from Li Jinan. "You're such a busybody. I wouldn't dare." Li Jinan looked at him with a smile. Yi Yu observed the atmosphere. She opened her handbag and retrieved a red box from it. She said, "I brought you a little something. I figured that you wouldn't be lacking anything, so I didn't bring anything particularly expensive." She opened the box. Inside was a beautiful and intricate beeswax figurine. It was orange-yellow in color and had a full luster. The color was bright and glossy. The lines were smooth and majestic. The figure was that of a young man. Judging from the way he was dressed, he bore a striking resemblance to old Captain Li when he was younger. When old Captain Li saw it, his murky eyes lit up. He was absolutely stunned. When he saw Yi Yu pass it over, he reached out to pick up the figurine. He looked it over and said, "It's really not bad. Did you custom make this?" "Yeah. I saw a black and white photo of you in my father's room, so I took a picture of it and got the craftsman to make one for me," Yi Yu replied with a smile. "That's very thoughtful of you." Old Captain Li's impression of the girl improved. He laughed and said, "You're Yu Yu, right?" You're a smart girl. Come have some tea. The moment Li Sun said that, Li Jinan immediately picked up the teacup and handed it to Yi Yu. In a low voice he said, "You hid it pretty well. Why didn't I know that you made this? Looks pretty good. There's a lot you don't know. If I hadn't remembered it myself, you wouldn't have reminded me to bring anything." "How rude of you," Yi Yu said softly. Although her voice was soft, old Captain Li heard it clearly. Yi Yu accepted the teacup but didn't drink it herself. Instead she stood up and said, "Lu Sa, have some tea." Lu Sa was flattered. She hurried forward to take it and said, Thank you. You drink it too." "Captain Li." Yi Yu sat with Li Jinan for a while longer. After having lunch with Captain Li, she left. Li Xiao and Qin Shuhua hadn't been home recently, so the house seemed especially deserted. Li Tututu. Li Tututu Li Tutu Li Li. Li Xiqing's first sentence cut the conversation short. Li Jinan touched his nose and replied, "How could I? I'm at the old manor now. Only Lu Sa is keeping grandfather company. Why don't you bring the kids back for a walk?" When he heard that, Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and asked, "Whose kids are you walking?" Chapter 15-17. Then he thought of something and said, "I heard that you're going to bring your girlfriend back for Grandpa to see. Are you bringing her today?" "Yes, I did. Grandpa seems to have a good impression of her." Li Jinan had a happy expression on his face as he replied, "You should have met her before. She was Yi Qianshan's younger sister the last time we went on a trip. Do you remember her?" "Yi Qianshan's younger sister?" Li Xiqing thought about it and asked, "Who is Yi Qianshan?" "Forget it. I'd better head back. Hurry up and take the children to the old manor. You should come back and work by yourself. Your sister-in-law has been vomiting a lot recently. How can you bear to see me in the company all day?" He began to play the emotional card. "At least your sister-in-law took care of you when you were in the hospital. Now you're leaving everything to me. My wife can't be with you anymore. Your sister-in-law is pregnant and taking care of 3 naughty kids. Stop." Li Jinan was exasperated. "I don't have much for you to do in the company. Furthermore, you've only taken care of some small matters. Haven't I been left to handle the bigger ones?" Hearing that, Li Xiqing calmly said, "Those things can't be handled by an agent, so I'll leave it to you. If you don't handle it well, it will be troublesome." Li Jinan was speechless. "Also, we agreed on 3 days. It's already the 2nd day. You have to come back tomorrow to help me. I have to accompany your sister-in-law for a prenatal checkup tomorrow." Li Xiqing looked at the time and said, "That's enough talk. Your sister-in-law is asking me to go home for dinner. When you're done, come to Wuxia and drag those brats back to the old house. That way I can have a few days alone." After that, he hung up the phone. Li Jinan was speechless. Hearing the busy tone from the other side of the phone, his heart was in a mess. No matter how hard he tried, he could never be as thick-skinned as Li Xiqing. However, he couldn't refute any of his reasons. "Let's go to my brother's house," Li Jinan said helplessly. Yi Yu asked, "Where are you going?" "Go and bring these little ancestors to the old mansion." By the time Li Jinan arrived at Wuxia Villa District, it was almost 1 p.m. He pressed the doorbell and soon the sound of children running could be heard from inside. Li Mosen shouted, "Who is it?" "It's me, uncle," Li Jinan replied. Li Mosen quickly opened the door. When he saw Li Jinan, he smiled happily, but when he saw Yi Yu behind Li Jinan, he asked, "Who is this auntie?" "My girlfriend. Call me auntie." Li Jinan walked in and looked inside. Yi Yu reached out to smack him and said, "Don't misguide the child." Li Mosen ignored Yi Yu and listened to Li Jinan. He obediently greeted, "Hello, auntie." Yi Yu was a little embarrassed by the way he addressed her and quickly replied, "Hello." Li Jinan walked in and saw Li Xiqing sitting on the sofa with Su Chenxi. They were looking at the tablet computer very close. Her 2-month-old belly was inconspicuous. It was just that her movement of stroking her belly was very easy to imagine. "Second brother, second sister-in-law, you're here." Without looking back, Li Xiqing said, "I'm done." Li Jinan replied, "I'm not here to freeload." "Yeah, the child is inside. Take him away." "Ursu, Daddy, am I really your biological son?" Chapter 15-18. Li Jinan was a little flustered. He asked angrily, "Second brother, do you really not welcome me?" Li Xiqing looked at him lazily and asked, "Why did you ask if you already knew?" Su Chenxi chuckled and gave Li Xiqing a nudge. She said, "How can you treat your brother like that? Be careful that the children learn from you." Li Xiqing hugged Su Qianxi tightly and whispered, "Don't worry. My son won't do that." Su Qianxi turned her head away in disgust and looked at Yi Yuyu. She was shocked and exclaimed, "Yuyu?" Yi Yuyu was a little embarrassed and said, "Hi Qian. Oh my god, you're with my uncle?" Su Qianxi couldn't believe it. She looked at Li Jinan and said, "You're too fast." She had just heard that Yi Yuyu had gotten divorced a few days ago. How did she end up with Li Jinan in the blink of an eye? Ah, that's right, Li Jinan had already had some feelings for Yi Yuyu. When she heard that he was bringing someone home, she thought that since Yi Yuyu had just gotten divorced, it couldn't be her. Unexpectedly, Su Qianxi was dumbfounded when she came back. That was good. It was highly likely that they had gotten together before Yi Yuyu had gotten a divorce, hadn't it? With that thought, Su Qianxi suddenly felt a little sinister. But that feeling was getting stronger and stronger. The way she looked at Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan was filled with curiosity. Yi Yuyu was a little embarrassed by Su Qianxi's straightforward words and said, "Well, it wasn't that fast." Li Jinan was a lot more at ease. He put his arm around Yi Yuyu's shoulder and said, "It wasn't that fast. I brought her home to meet her." She turned to look at Li Mosen and said, "Mosen, get Desu and Ursu out. Let them meet their future aunt." When Li Mosen heard that, he immediately turned and ran in. He shouted, "Desu Ursu. Has Grandpa been bored at home lately?" Su Qianxi couldn't bear it and said, "I was thinking that with Lu Sa accompanying Grandpa, he would probably get along well with her. The children are a little noisy and I was afraid that they would disturb his rest." "How could that be? After all, he's my great-grandson. Grandpa can't wait to dote on him. How could I dislike him?" Li Jinan pulled Yi Yuyu to sit down and said, "Grandpa's room is soundproof and the house is huge. If Grandpa finds it too noisy, he'll find a place to hide. Don't be afraid." Su Qianxi nodded. "You are so thoughtful. I did not think of this." However, Li Xiqing saw through his intentions at a glance and said, "This may be one of the reasons, but the most fundamental reason is that you want to use the children, right?" When Li Jinan heard that, his expression turned serious. He said, "Second brother, how could you think that way? I'm doing this for grandfather's own good. I'm afraid that he'll be bored at home. That's why I thought of bringing the children back." "Well, you used the children's mouths to tell Mom and Dad that you had a girlfriend. When they interrogated you, you pretended to tell them about it and then tricked them. Tiske." Li Xiqing couldn't bear to look at it and said, "What an unfilial son." Yi Yuyu and Su Qianxi hadn't thought of that at all. They both looked at Li Jinan. Chapter 15-19. These words were tantamount to a direct admission. Yi Yuyu secretly clicked her tongue. What a deep trap. She thought he simply thought that Elder Tang might be bored at home, so he wanted to take the kids home. Who knew there was a deeper meaning behind it? Li Xiqing stopped talking and then there was the sound of children jumping upstairs. When she saw Li Jinan, she ran down with a smile and shouted, "Uncle! Auntie is here too." Li Jianyue had bathed with Yi Yuyu previously, so she had a deeper impression of her than Li Mosen. Li Jinan waved at Li Jianyue and said, "Ursu, come here." Li Ursu immediately jumped over. Su Qianxi was shocked and yelled, "Be careful." Li Ursu on the other hand was bold. She quickly jumped down and ran toward Li Jinan. She threw herself onto his lap and called out coquettishly, "Little uncle." He picked her up and asked, "Did Daddy and Mommy take you to school recently?" "No, I've been taking exams recently." Li Jianyue giggled. "The test was too easy. I finished it in one go and every question was correct." "Oh? What test?" "It's the entrance exam. In September I'll be going to primary school," Li Jianyue said proudly. "My brothers are going to primary school too. But Brother Mosen seems to be able to enter the 3rd grade. So powerful? Skipping a grade?" When Li Jinan said that, he looked in Li Xiqing's direction. "Yes, I skipped a grade. I passed the test. I scored 100 points in English, mathematics, and English." Li Xiqing sounded a bit satisfied. She could have been in the 5th grade, but the jump should not be too big. It is not good for her future development. "Why do I feel like you're showing off?" "No, I'm just making a statement." Li Xiqing's tone was flat. "If you want to take the child home, hurry up. I still have work to do. Isn't sister-in-law at home? You should go." "She's coming with me." Li Xiqing hugged his wife tightly and said, "I'm worried about the children at home. Take them away quickly." Li Jianyue blinked and asked, "Daddy, where are we going?" "Go to Grandpa's house and stay for a few days. Lately, Great-Grandpa has been alone at home and is very bored. I hope you guys can accompany him." Su Qianxi said, In a few days when Grandpa and Grandma come back from their trip, you can come home. She looked at Li Jianxian who was walking over and said, "Brother, we can play with great-grandfather again." Li Jianxian nodded his head and replied, "All right, Dad. I'm done with my homework. Take a look." Handing over the book, Li Xiqing quickly flipped through it. About 2 minutes later he nodded and said, "Okay, but the last question is wrong. Come here, I'll explain it to you." Li Jianxian walked over obediently, stood aside and looked at the book. Li Xiqing pointed at the questions and began to explain them in detail. "That sounded familiar to you." She replied, "This question seems a little difficult. Which grade is it for?" Chapter 15:20. Li Jianxian listened attentively. Li Xiqing's explanation was very detailed. Even Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan had already come up with the question that they hadn't seen. After explaining, Li Jianxian picked up the pen and did it again. This time it was completely correct. Li Xiqing nodded his head in satisfaction and said, "Go on. Pack up and follow your uncle to Grandpa's house." Li Jianxian put the notebook away. With a natural expression he quickly walked up the stairs. Li Jinan clicked his tongue and shook his head. He asked, "I say, second brother, how did you teach these kids?" "I taught them myself." "Teach the three of them at the same time?" Li Jinan looked at Li Jianyue in his arms and felt that it was a little unrealistic. Li Xiqing also looked at Li Jianyue and nodded his head. In a meaningful tone he said, "How much the three of them can learn will depend on luck." Li Jinan felt the same way. Once again he wondered if the hospital had swapped the wrong babies when they were giving birth. Li Jianyue seemed to know that they were talking about her. She blinked her eyes and looked around. Then she asked, "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to the hospital to see little brother tomorrow?" "Yeah. I'm going to see if little brother is obedient in Mommy's tummy." Li Xiqing's gaze softened. He tilted his head and stroked Su Qianxi's belly. "I hope his brain will develop better in the future." Su Qianxi reached out and pushed him away. She glared at him. Li Xiqing chuckled and stood up. "Let's go to the office. Leave the children to third brother." Li Jinan was a little confused. "Aren't you afraid that I'll sell these children?" "Sell them? I have work to do with your sister-in-law," Li Xiqing said as he held Su Qianxi's hand. "When you go out later, remember to bring their luggage with you. Let them carry it themselves. Don't help them carry it, especially the little one." Li Jianyue snorted and pouted. "Daddy is too naughty. I don't want to carry the luggage." "No, Uncle isn't here to help you carry the luggage. You have to carry it yourself," Li Xiqing rejected. Li Jianyue was a little unhappy. She got off Li Jinan and ran up to the second floor. Su Qianxi was a little unhappy to see her daughter. She nudged Li Xiqing and said, "They are still young. Don't be too strict with them. You have to teach them well when they're young. You spoil them too much." Li Xiqing took her hand and said, "The children of the Li family can't be raised as children. Grandpa's old now. You don't know how we were raised when we were young." The memory was still fresh in Li Jinan's mind. He said, "Grandfather believed in this saying, a filial son is born of the rod. The moment we were disobedient, he would give us a few strokes of the rod until we became obedient." Li Xiqing said, "It has been proven to be very effective. Just look at third brother. Third elderly. Second brother is more effective. After all, he is grandfather's favorite grandson. Well, at least I won't screw up when everyone is looking forward to it. I won't be whipped and lose a layer of my skin. At least I asked for my wife myself. Nothing is set in stone yet. You can get past the old man, but can you handle Mom?" Li Xiqing looked at Li Jinan with disdain. "Third young Master Li, why are you still so naive? Second young Master Li is just as rude as before." Li Jinan was speechless. He reached into his pocket and took out a pack of cigarettes. Chapter 15:21. Li Jinan had just taken out a cigarette. When he heard that, he immediately stuffed it back in and said angrily, "Why aren't you leaving?" Li Xiqing's lips curled up slightly. He held his wife's hand and opened the door. When they finally left, Li Jinan stuffed the pack of cigarettes back and said, "Children, are you done?" "Ursu is still packing. Uncle, wait for us." Li Jianxian's voice was very loud. It came from the second floor. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the little ones dragged their small boxes down. Each of them had a small box. Li Jianyue was carrying a pink ice snow princess box with cute little stickers on it. She was also holding a big Barbie doll in her arms. It was obviously a little difficult to carry the small box. She pouted and said, "Daddy is bad. Ursa can't carry it. Uncle, it's heavy." Li Jinnan glanced at it and went forward to weigh it. He said, "It's really a little heavy." Li Jianyue nodded and immediately said, "Right? Uncle, you think so too, right? Then can you help Ursa carry it?" "Thank you, uncle." Li Jianyue had a pair of big eyes and she looked at him with a pair of watery eyes. Li Jinnan was indifferent. He stuffed the small box back into her hands and said, "I promised your father that I wouldn't help you. I can't help you. Otherwise I will be breaking my promise. I can't do this." The little girl pouted and whispered, "If you don't say it and I don't say it, no one will know." Li Jinnan chuckled and pinched her little face. He said, "How can that be? There are no walls in the world that have ears. As a person you can't do bad things and you can't lie. Otherwise, it will be very embarrassing if the truth is revealed one day." The little girl didn't quite understand, but she finally understood that Li Jinnan wasn't going to help her. He hugged the doll angrily and dragged the small box with him as he strode forward. Her small body was trembling and full of energy, but her temper was a little big. Yi Yuyu was amused by her behavior and said, "You really don't plan to help her? Children can't be spoiled. Otherwise she will get used to it." As Li Jinnan spoke, he looked at the two little fellows behind him and said, "Hurry up and catch up. You're both older brothers." Li Jianchen was carrying a small sapphire blue box with no patterns on it. Li Mosen was carrying a golden transformer which looked a little cool. Yi Yuyu found it a little strange and asked, "Who bought your little boxes for you?" "Daddy bought them. We picked them ourselves." Li Jianyue turned her head and smiled. "I like little princesses the most." Her little face was all smiles, as if the anger from before had dissipated with the wind. Yi Yuyu was speechless. This little girl changed too quickly. Li Jinnan chuckled. He pulled her into his arms and said, "Let's go home." "I'm going too?" Yi Yuyu felt a little afraid. "Didn't you say that your parents are coming back today? What's there to be afraid of? Let's meet her together when we're back." As he spoke, he looked at the little ones and asked, "Do you know who she is?" "I know. And Yi Yuyu." Li Jianyue answered quickly. Li Mosen quickly replied, "Auntie." Chapter 1522. Li Jianyue was immediately elated. She laughed heartily and shouted, "Little uncle is the best." After buying all the gifts, the children were overjoyed. By the time they returned to the old mansion, it was already 3 p.m. The children carried their own luggage and walked forward. When they reached home, they found Li Xiao and Qin Shua's car parked at the entrance. Li Jinnan knew he was in trouble when he saw it. They had really bumped into each other? When Yi Yuyu saw it, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She asked, "Is this your father's car? He's really back. What should we do?" "What's there to be afraid of?" Li Jinnan didn't seem to care at all. "It's just a meeting. If you don't want to see them, we can leave now." When Li Mosen heard the adults talking, he asked, "Little auntie, don't you want to see my grandparents? Grandpa and Grandma are very nice people." "Yeah. Grandpa and Grandma love us very much. Grandma often cooks sweet soup for us. It's especially sweet." As Li Jianyue spoke, she was almost drooling. She reached out and opened the car door. The little girl quickly got out and said, "Little uncle, open the box." The box she was referring to was the trunk of the car. The children's gifts and luggage were all placed in the trunk. Li Jianyue went to the back and patted the trunk. "Little uncle." The little doll's clear and melodious voice quickly spread inside the house. When Lu Sa heard Li Jianyue's voice, she quickly came out to take a look. She was overjoyed and said, "Little Miss is back. The young masters are back too." Lu Sa sat into the car. She jogged out against the scorching sun and said, "The sun is so strong. Why didn't you open an umbrella? What if you get sunburned?" As she spoke, she reached out to help the children carry their luggage. When she looked up, she saw Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu in the car. She said, "Third young master, Miss Yi, sir and madam are back. Would you like to come in and sit for a while?" Li Jinan subconsciously glanced at Yi Yuyu. When he saw her nervous expression, he shook his head and said, "There's no need. We still have things to do. We'll come back when we have time." Lu Sa knew a little about it. When she heard that, she didn't force it. She helped the children carry their luggage. Just as she was about to walk inside, the children stopped her. Li Mosen said, "Sixth grandma, we have to carry it ourselves. Dad said that we have to do our own things, especially this little one." Li Jianchen was a little disgusted and gave the luggage back to Li Jianyue. "Take it yourself." Li Jianyue was a little unhappy, but she still took it. She carried it and skipped inside. She shouted, "Great-grandpa, I'm back." Old Master Li was in a very good mood today. When he heard the voice, he laughed out loud and came out to greet her. "Ursa, you're back. Let me see if you've gained weight." As he spoke, his gaze fell on the car in front of him. The smile in his eyes deepened. "Have you seen your little uncle's girlfriend?" "Yes. Yes, she's very, very beautiful and she's a very nice person." Li Jinyue's voice was crisp and not soft at all. Little uncle said that he would marry little aunt in the future. Chapter 1523. Li Jinyue was a quick-witted girl. She seemed to have some idea of Captain Li's intentions, but she wasn't quite sure. When she heard that, she quickly nodded her head with a smile and replied, "Got it." Indeed, the strategy of using the children to mislead the public was very effective. Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu had just returned home when they received a call from home. Yi Yuyu looked at the time and felt that it was time to go grocery shopping. When she turned her head, she saw that Li Jinan had actually answered the call. She looked at him and saw that his lips were full of smiles. "Yeah, there's one." On the other end of the line, Qin Shuhua became excited and asked, "Really? What does she look like? What's she like? Where is she from? Has she had any friends before? Is her family clean?" The series of questions left Li Jinan speechless for a moment. He laughed and said, "Mom, you're asking so many questions at once. How am I supposed to answer all of them?" "Let me ask you the most important question," Qin Shuhua said. "Do you really like her? Does she like you? Don't you think that you're the one who's hot-headed and she's not interested in you? That wouldn't be fun." Qin Shuhua's worries weren't without reason. Li Jinan had been in the military for so many years. Even though he had already retired, his military instincts were still there. It wasn't just his physique. Even the way he spoke and did things exuded the authority of a colonel. How could an ordinary girl stand it? Li Jinan laughed and replied, "How can that be? Look at your son. He's handsome and suave. Who wouldn't like him?" Qin Shuhua was tickled by him and retorted, "Get lost. I'm being serious here." "I'm being serious too. Actually, we've been together for a long time. We just didn't bring it home." Li Jinan chose his words carefully and said, "I was afraid that you would find her too young." When she heard that, Qin Shuhua immediately felt a sense of crisis. She asked, "How old is she? Is she still a minor?" "No, that won't do." "How could that be?" Li Jinan was defeated by her wild imagination and said, "She's 5 years younger than me." Qin Shuhua immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "You scared me. 5 years is not that old. Look at your second brother and sister-in-law. They are 6 years apart. When your grandfather wanted your second brother to marry Qian, I thought that the 6-year difference would be a clash of zodiac signs and they wouldn't be able to get along. Who would have thought that they would be fine? It's fine as long as they are clean and young." "Don't worry. It's absolutely clean," Li Jinan guaranteed. "Grandpa knows their family. Their family background is clean." Qin Shuhua let out a sigh of relief and whispered, "Is the girl next to you?" "Yes. Hide for a while. Mom wants to talk to you about something else." When Li Jinan heard the mysterious look on Qin Shuhua's face, he knew that what she was about to say was anything but simple. Indeed, the moment he moved to the side, Qin Shuhua said, "I'm not talking about whether her family background is clean or not. I trust you about her family background. What's more important is whether the girl has had any friends before and whether she's clean or not." When Li Jinan heard that, he felt a little uncomfortable and replied, "Mom, what are you talking about? Naturally, I have to take responsibility for her. That's why I'm with her." Chapter 1524. I have something to do and Yuyu is thin-skinned. She thinks it's too early to meet her parents, so she left without any preparation. Qin Shuhua rebuked, "We'll be family sooner or later. Don't be shy." "Alright, Mom, let's talk about it later. I'm going to buy groceries with her." "Oh, you're different now that you have a partner. You can even buy groceries and cook?" Qin Shuhua was happy from the bottom of her heart. "Hurry up and go. When you're ready, let me know and I'll prepare food for you." "Alright, goodbye." He turned his head and realized that Yi Yuyu was sitting on the sofa and looking at him. She looked like she was in a daze. He walked over to her and leaned over to cup her face. He gently sucked on her lips and said, "My mom called me. She asked me to take you home to see her." When Yi Yuyu heard that, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist. She asked, "Didn't you tell your mother about me?" "No." Li Jinan took the opportunity to suppress it. "She'll find out sooner or later. Let her cherish it for a period of time first. Once she's mentally prepared, we'll let her know." Yi Yuyu felt that something was amiss and asked, If your mother finds out that you lied to her, will she be angry? How is this cheating? I just didn't say some things. It's not cheating. Li Jinan pulled her up. Let's go. Yi Yuyu accepted his explanation. She stood up lazily and followed him out the door. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was still strong. Yi Yuyu had specially brought a parasol with her. After sprinkling some water on it, she walked out the door. Li Jinan naturally took the umbrella and asked, "What would you like to eat?" "I can do anything. What about you?" "Me too." Yi Yuyu replied, "Can you make a request?" "I'll see if I'm up to it." Braised eggplant, fish head tofu soup, boiled prawns, that's all. "Didn't you say that you could do anything?" "Yes," Li Jinan said with a smile in his eyes. He looked at her and said, "I'm not picky. Do you eat coriander?" "Oh, I don't want to eat it." "Do you eat carrots?" "I won't take it. It's for contraception." She suddenly felt that she shouldn't have asked those questions. She shut her mouth and turned her head away. But when he saw someone selling chives, his eyes immediately lit up. Many people could not stand the strong taste of chives. "Do you eat chives?" Yi Yu asked with a smile. Li Jinan tilted his head and looked her in the eye. He replied, "If necessary, you can eat it." "When necessary. Chives have another name." "Why didn't I know about this?" "You must know about the aphrodisiac grass." Yi Yu replied, "Pretend I never asked." The smile in Li Jinan's eyes deepened as he replied, "Yi Yu." Yi Yu was just thinking about how she was going to buy the ingredients. When she heard his voice, she turned her head. Before she could react, she saw Li Jinan suddenly bend down and plant a huge kiss on her lips. His voice wasn't soft and it was very eye-catching. Yi Yu felt the sun above her head burn brighter, and the light became more blinding. In an instant, her face and body began to burn. Yi Yu quickly turned around and walked in front. Her heart was beating like thunder. It was as if everyone was looking at her. Chapter 1525. It was the 20th day since she arrived at a small town in Jiangnan. Shen Manting had found a job as a tutor in the town and had been working for a week. The student's house was very clean and it was not far from her rented house, so it was easy to get to and from work. In addition to being a tutor, Shen Manting often helped to plant flowers and do handicrafts in the neighborhood. The neighbors all liked her very much. In the 9th week of pregnancy, her morning sickness became more and more serious. She couldn't eat much every day and her body became thinner and thinner. As a woman who lived alone and had obvious pregnancy symptoms, many people noticed that she was different. Many people would come to her and ask, "Where's your husband? Where's the child's father? No matter what, you should go home first. It's not easy for a pregnant woman." Every time she heard such words, Shen Manting just smiled and did not answer. It was another tired day. When she returned to her small rented house, Shen Manting took out her computer as usual and opened a document to edit. July 28th, sunny. It was another day of tutoring. From an English teacher for 1 or 2 students, she slowly became a tutor for all subjects. Her working hours had also increased from 1 hour to 5 hours. Wang Shui's parents said they would raise my salary by 10 yuan. I was very happy. The income was good, there were no worries, the weather was sunny and the town was friendly. Everything was fine. Today she vomited more than yesterday. She couldn't eat breakfast and her face was pale. Fortunately, she still had makeup, so she looked more refreshed. The baby was growing bigger and bigger. She didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. On the 20th day of leaving, everything was fine. Manting. It was another day of nightmares. When Shen Luo woke up, he was sweating profusely. In the dream, Shen Manting looked at him with a sad smile on her face. There was no sorrow or pain, but it was full of sorrow and pain. It was very contradictory, but Shen Luo could clearly feel the contradictory emotions. It was as if Shen Manting was by his side, looking at him with such an indescribable complexity that penetrated straight into his heart. Shen Luo got up and was a little upset. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the headboard, exhaling a long puff of smoke. In the darkness, everything was dark except for the orange-red spark in the middle of his long finger, which was faintly flickering. Shen Manting left. Without any news or explanation, he just disappeared from his world without a trace. Every night he would press down on that body, the body that he had only tried. It had been almost a month since he had last touched it. Sorrow came from the heart. Even Shen Luo himself didn't know what he was sad about. Everything came out of the blue, but it caught him off guard. Shen Luo's eyes stung from the smoke. The loneliness of the night assaulted him layer by layer. In a few days it would be his and Guan Kui's wedding, but he did not feel the slightest bit of joy as a groom. Everything seemed to have nothing to do with him. He picked up his phone and clicked on the photo his friend had sent him. Yu was sitting opposite a young man. She was eating quietly with her head lowered. However, the expression on his face was very relaxed. The figure that had been blurry for a long time in his mind became clearer and clearer. Really long time no see. Chapter 15:26. Early in the morning Yu stretched her back. Her body was so sore that it felt like it was going to collapse. The moment she moved, the bones in her body creaked and she felt a lot more comfortable. But before he could fully stretch, he was grabbed by a lecherous hand. Li Jinan nuzzled against her neck. His chin, which was still covered in stubble, tickled her. Yu turned her head away in disgust. She pushed his head away and said, "Don't do that. It's ticklish." Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't heard her. He continued to tease her fair skin and asked, "Where is it ticklish?" Here, or here." Yu's body was ticklish. She laughed and pushed him away. "Stop it." "Yeah." Li Jinan hugged her and said, "Kiss me." "No." Yu flipped over and faced her back. Li Jinan's eyes were mischievous as he kissed her from behind. He worshipped her carefully and caressed her lightly. His movements were extremely gentle. "Then I'll kiss you. Do you miss me?" His lips were on her skin. He slowly moved up and asked, "Where should I kiss you?" Yu's breathing grew heavy. Her body was reacting to his touch. Her body remained stiff and refused to move. She said, "Go away. I want to sleep. It's getting late. You should get up." "No." Yu shut her eyes tightly and refused to get up. Li Jinan sighed softly and said, "My mom is coming over today." His words were like a heavy bomb that suddenly dropped on Yu's heart. Yu's eyes flew open. She was shocked. She turned around and looked at Li Jinan. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she asked, "What?" "I said, my mom is coming over today." Yu couldn't sleep anymore. She sat up abruptly and threw the blanket aside to get out of bed. She was naked, but she didn't care. She rushed into the bathroom. Li Jinan laughed and called out, "She's not here yet. Don't be nervous." Yu screamed, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" As she screamed, she looked at her body in the mirror. The bruises were stacked on top of each other. It looked as if she had been subjected to inhumane torture. How could such a situation be concealed? Heavens, he clearly knew that his mother was coming, but he still sucked so much. He was simply a bastard. When Li Jinan heard that, he seemed to be in a good mood. He replied, "Didn't I tell you now? It's only 6 o'clock. It's still early." Yu was on the verge of a breakdown. She quickly wet a towel with hot water and placed it on her neck where her clothes couldn't easily cover. It was just that it was scalded to the point where it didn't seem to go down by much. She suddenly thought of something and yelled out, "Does your mother know that we're together?" "Of course she knows." Li Jinan yawned nonchalantly. He shifted into a more comfortable position and said, "If she didn't know, she wouldn't have come to see me." In other words, this time, his mother mainly came to see him. Yu put the hot towel down. It was a little messy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.